The battlefield of Pharsalia lay quiet in the early dawn, its echoes of clashing swords and dying men now reduced to a deathly stillness. Julius Caesar stood atop a small rise, his scarlet cloak billowing slightly in the cool morning breeze. Below him, the remnants of Pompey's once mighty legions sprawled across the field in heaps, their standards broken, their morale shattered. The carnage of battle painted the landscape in blood and smoke, but Caesar's gaze was not one of triumph, it was one of contemplation. His eyes swept across the field, taking in the remnants of a civil war that had torn apart the Roman Republic. In the distance, his soldiers moved among the fallen, stripping the dead of armor and weapons, collecting what little could be salvaged. The air was thick with the metallic stench of blood and the charred remains of war machines. Rome, he muttered to himself, is mine. But it was not the conquest that preoccupied his thoughts, it was Pompey. The man who had once stood as his equal, his rival, and at times, his friend. Now a fugitive, Pompey had fled the battlefield in disgrace, abandoning his forces to Caesar's mercy. Caesar's brow furrowed. He knew Pompey was a man of pride, but Pharsalia had broken something in him. A spark of pity, perhaps regret, flickered in Caesar's chest. Behind him, a figure approached. Marcus Antonius, his loyal lieutenant and friend, strode up the hill. The dirt and blood of battle still clung to his armor, but his expression was resolute. Pompey has fled, Antonius said, his voice a mixture of relief and anticipation. He's headed for the coast, toward Egypt. Caesar nodded, his mind already racing. Then we must follow. Pompey cannot be allowed to rally support or regroup. His escape will not only embolden his allies but prolong this war. We end it now, in Egypt, if need be. Antonius looked out over the battlefield, the remnants of Pompey's shattered legions a testament to Caesar's military genius. You've won a great victory today. Rome will never be the same. Caesar turned to him, his face unreadable. Rome is only at the beginning of its transformation, Antonius. Today was not victory, it was merely the prelude. As the sun began to rise, its first rays cutting through the mist of battle, Caesar's army began to gather, the triumphant shouts of his soldiers mingling with the groans of the wounded. But there was little time for celebration. The war was not yet over, and Caesar knew that victory on the battlefield was only one part of the struggle. Rome's future lay in his hands, and it required more than swords and shields to secure. We leave for Alexandria within the week, Caesar declared, his voice calm yet commanding. Pompey will not escape us again. Antonius nodded, his loyalty to Caesar unwavering. As you command. As Caesar mounted his horse, the dawn now fully breaking over the horizon, he cast one last look at the battlefield. In the blood-soaked fields of Pharsalia, the fate of the Roman Republic had been decided. But the real battle for power, for the future of Rome, was just beginning. Pompey would be pursued, and Caesar would not rest until his rival was brought to justice, or laid in the ground. With a sharp tug of the reins, Caesar spurred his horse forward, leading his army away from the smoking ruins of Pharsalia and toward the distant shores of Egypt, where destiny, and Cleopatra, awaited. Thus, the pursuit of Pompey began. The Mediterranean sparkled under the midday sun, its calm waters a stark contrast to the turmoil that brewed beneath the surface. Aboard his flagship, Julius Caesar stood on the deck, watching as the coast of Egypt came into view. His thoughts lingered on Pompey's escape, an unfinished chapter in a bloody civil war that had left Rome fractured. Now, the fugitive sought refuge in Egypt, and Caesar would not allow him to slip away again. Beside him, Marcus Antonius adjusted his cloak against the breeze. "Do you believe Ptolemy will welcome Pompey?" he asked, scanning the distant coastline where Alexandria's great lighthouse loomed like a sentinel. Caesar's face remained impassive, though his sharp mind raced with possibilities. "Ptolemy is young, perhaps too eager to please. He may think handing over Pompey will secure favor with Rome." The thought lingered in the air between them, a gift wrapped in treachery. Caesar had no illusions about the political games that rulers played, especially in a kingdom as precarious as Egypt. With Cleopatra deposed and in hiding, her younger brother Ptolemy XIII now sat on the throne, though his rule was anything but stable. As the ship glided closer to the harbor, Caesar turned to his navigator. "We make for Alexandria. Prepare the men." Antonius, though ever the soldier, could not help but marvel at the city that came into view. Alexandria, with its towering white walls and bustling streets, stood as a monument to both Greek and Egyptian grandeur. Yet beneath its splendor, Caesar sensed the fragility of a kingdom teetering on the edge of collapse. Once the ships docked, Caesar disembarked with his retinue, his scarlet cloak standing out among the throngs of Egyptian merchants and Roman soldiers alike. He moved with purpose, his eyes taking in the opulence of the city but always searching for signs of what awaited him. Pompey. They were met at the docks by a small delegation led by Theodotus, an advisor to Ptolemy. The man's smile was as oily as the heat that clung to the air. "Great Caesar," Theodotus began with a theatrical bow, "welcome to Alexandria. Pharaoh Ptolemy extends his deepest respects and has prepared a gift for you." Caesar's brow furrowed slightly. "A gift?" Theodotus straightened, clasping his hands together as if savoring the moment. "Yes, a gift to show Egypt's loyalty to Rome." He gestured to a small group of soldiers, who approached carrying a covered object on a wooden plank. As the soldiers placed the object before Caesar, they removed the cloth. A sharp intake of breath spread through Caesar's ranks as the grisly sight revealed itself, the severed head of Pompey the Great, preserved in cruel clarity. The once proud general, who had stood as Caesar's equal, reduced to nothing more than a macabre trophy. For a long moment, Caesar stared at the head in silence. His face betrayed no emotion, but Antonius could sense the tension in his leader's stance. "Is this," Caesar spoke at last, his voice cold as iron, "how Egypt honors its allies?" Theodotus faltered, the smile vanishing from his face. "Pharaoh believed it would please you, Caesar. After all, Pompey was your enemy, was he not?" Caesar stepped forward, his gaze piercing through the man. "Pompey was a Roman, a consul of the Republic. His defeat was mine to claim, not yours." A silence fell over the docks, thick with the weight of Caesar's wrath. Antonius exchanged a glance with the other officers, knowing that Ptolemy had gravely miscalculated. This was not the victory Caesar had sought. There was no honor in the way Pompey had died, butchered by a foreign hand. Caesar turned abruptly, addressing his soldiers. "We go to the palace." Without waiting for Theodotus or the Egyptian guards, Caesar led his men through the crowded streets toward the royal palace. His anger simmered beneath the surface, but his mind was clear. Ptolemy had made a fatal error in presuming he could curry favor by such dishonorable means. The palace rose ahead, a gleaming testament to Egyptian opulence. Golden statues, towering columns, and fragrant gardens surrounded the royal compound. But to Caesar, it was merely a facade, a crumbling edifice masking a kingdom in disarray. As they approached the gates, Caesar paused. "Pompey's blood stains this kingdom now," he muttered to Antonius. "And I will not leave until I've restored order." Antonius nodded. "What of Ptolemy?" "His reign is weak." Caesar's eyes narrowed. "His rule is already shattered. There is another who may yet be worthy of Egypt's throne." The name lingered in Caesar's thoughts: Cleopatra. Though exiled, her intelligence and ambition were well known. If Egypt was to be an ally of Rome, it needed a ruler strong enough to maintain it, someone who could match Caesar's own vision for power. As they neared the palace doors, Caesar's mind shifted from vengeance to strategy. Pompey's death had closed one chapter, but Egypt, this ruined kingdom, was a new battleground. And in its tangled politics lay an opportunity. The future of Egypt, of Rome, and of Caesar himself now rested in the hands of a deposed queen waiting in the shadows. The royal court of Alexandria brimmed with grandeur, its marbled floors gleaming under the light of the midday sun. Golden statues of the gods lined the halls, and silken tapestries swayed gently in the warm breeze. Yet beneath this display of wealth, a tense undercurrent simmered. The young pharaoh, Ptolemy XIII, sat upon his throne, barely 16, but already a player in the deadly game of power. Julius Caesar, flanked by his loyal officers, entered the great hall. His imposing presence drew the gaze of every courtier in the room. The Roman general's expression was unreadable as he approached the throne, his sharp eyes observing the young king who now held the fate of Egypt in his grasp. Ptolemy shifted uneasily, his youth betrayed by the nervous flicker in his eyes. At his side stood Pothinus, his chief advisor, and Achilles, the commander of his army. Both men wore masks of politeness, but their glances toward Caesar were filled with veiled calculation. Ptolemy forced a smile, rising from his seat as Caesar approached. "Great Caesar, it is an honor to welcome you to Alexandria." Caesar's gaze lingered on the boy king for a moment before he inclined his head slightly. "Pharaoh," he said, his tone neutral. "I had not expected such generosity from Egypt so soon upon my arrival." Ptolemy's smile faltered. He glanced toward Pothinus, who nodded reassuringly. With a wave of the boy king's hand, two guards entered the room, carrying between them a large chest. The soldiers placed it at the foot of the throne, their faces stoic as they removed the lid. Inside, resting on silken cushions, was Pompey's severed head. A murmur rippled through Caesar's men as they caught sight of the gruesome offering. Marcus Antonius, who had remained silent thus far, stiffened beside Caesar, his eyes narrowing in disgust. But Caesar's expression did not change. He stared down at the head of his former rival, the man who had once been his ally and equal in the triumvirate that had ruled Rome. Now reduced to this, an object of political expedience, Ptolemy, emboldened by the lack of immediate reaction, stepped forward, his voice laced with eagerness. Pompey fled here after Pharsalia, seeking refuge in Egypt. But we knew that Rome could not be at peace until he was dealt with. He gestured to the head, as if expecting Caesar to commend him for this act. Egypt stands with Rome. We knew this would please you, Caesar. For a long, agonizing moment, the hall was silent. Caesar continued to gaze at the lifeless face of Pompey, the lines of age and war still etched into his features, now frozen in death. A Roman consul, a man of Rome's highest honor, reduced to nothing more than a barbaric trophy, slowly, Caesar turned his gaze to Ptolemy. The cold fury in his eyes made the young king shrink back slightly, though he tried to maintain his composure. "You have made a grave error, boy," Caesar said, his voice low and measured, but it rang out clearly across the hall. Ptolemy's smile vanished instantly. But you thought wrong," Caesar interrupted, his tone sharp as a blade. He took a step forward, his figure towering over the young pharaoh. "Pompey was a Roman, not your enemy to kill. His fate was mine to decide, not yours." Ptolemy looked to Pothinus and Achilles for support, but neither man dared meet his gaze. Pothinus, his calculating mind now racing, stepped forward to smooth over the situation. "Caesar," Pothinus said smoothly, "Egypt only sought to align itself with the strongest power in Rome. We did not wish to prolong the war by allowing Pompey to escape." Caesar's eyes flicked toward the advisor. "You speak of loyalty, but what I see is treachery. Pompey came to you seeking refuge, and you murdered him like a common criminal. If this is how Egypt treats its allies, I wonder how it treats its enemies." A ripple of unease spread through the court as Caesar's words hung in the air. Ptolemy shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his advisors in growing panic. "Caesar, please," Ptolemy began, his voice shaky. I only wish to prove Egypt's loyalty to Rome." Caesar turned his back on the throne, his disgust barely concealed. "Your loyalty is proven by your actions, not by offering me the head of a Roman." Marcus Antonius, who had been watching the exchange silently, now stepped forward. "Shall we return this gift to the boy?" he muttered darkly, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Caesar gave a small shake of his head. "No. We have more important matters to attend to." He turned back to Ptolemy, his expression hard as stone. "Egypt is in chaos, and your rule is unstable. You are a boy, ill-prepared to govern this kingdom. If you wish to secure your throne, you will need Rome's support. But know this, I do not reward treachery." Ptolemy swallowed hard, nodding quickly. "Of course, Caesar. I will do whatever is necessary to maintain Egypt's stability." Caesar studied the boy king for a moment longer before giving a curt nod. "See that you do." Without another word, Caesar turned and strode out of the hall, his officers following closely behind. As they left the palace, Antonius glanced back over his shoulder at Ptolemy, his face a mask of contempt. "The boy is weak," Antonius said once they were outside, his voice low. He'll crumble the moment pressure is applied. Caesar's eyes remained fixed ahead as they walked through the palace gardens. Ptolemy is not the one who will shape Egypt's future, he replied. There is another. Antonius frowned. Cleopatra. Caesar's lips curled into a faint smile. Yes. The true ruler of Egypt. And soon, she will be back where she belongs. As they left the palace, the tension that had gripped the court lingered in the air. Ptolemy XIII had made his move, but it had only deepened his peril. The game of power in Egypt was just beginning, and Caesar, ever the strategist, had already set his sights on the next player. The great hall of Alexandria echoed with the fading sound of footsteps as Julius Caesar and his retinue made their exit, but the tension in the air remained thick, pressing down on everyone left in the room. Ptolemy XIII sat frozen on his throne, the lifeless eyes of Pompey's severed head still staring up at him from the chest. The boy king swallowed hard, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests of his gilded seat. He had expected gratitude, perhaps even admiration, for ridding Caesar of his rival. Instead, he had been met with the Romans' quiet, seething wrath. Outside the palace walls, Caesar's fury simmered just beneath the surface. He strode quickly across the marble courtyard, his officers following closely behind. Marcus Antonius, ever his trusted companion, could see the tension in Caesar's clenched jaw and quickened pace. "He is a fool, Caesar," Antonius muttered, glancing back at the palace doors. "A coward. He hides behind his advisors like a child and commits murder from the safety of his throne." Caesar halted abruptly, his anger finally breaking free. "Cowardice does not even begin to describe it, Antonius," he spat, his voice filled with venom. "He butchered Pompey like a dog. A man of Rome, a consul, no less, reduced to a mere trophy in some petty game of power." The Roman officers gathered around, standing in the shadow of the great lighthouse of Alexandria, but none dared to speak. They knew well enough to let Caesar's temper run its course. Caesar's hand gripped the hilt of his sword tightly as if it were the only thing keeping his rage in check. "Do you understand what this means? This boy king," he hissed, "thinks he can win favor by spilling Roman blood on foreign soil. He mocks us." Antonius stepped closer, his tone cautious but firm. "Ptolemy is not the true threat. It is his advisors, Pothinus and Achilles, who pull the strings. They have made this choice for him, and they are the ones we must deal with." Caesar's eyes darkened at the mention of Pothinus and Achilles. He had seen their calculating faces, their smugness barely concealed behind false pleasantries. They were the real power behind the boy king's throne, and it was clear they had underestimated him, Julius Caesar, conqueror of Gaul, victor at Pharsalia, and now the man they sought to manipulate. "Egypt stands at the edge of ruin," Caesar said, his voice a low growl. "These men have turned this kingdom into a den of treachery and cowardice. They think they can bend me to their will, use me to secure their hold on Egypt." He looked up at the towering lighthouse, a beacon of civilization in a city teetering on the brink of chaos. "But they will learn soon enough that Rome is not so easily manipulated." Antonius nodded, his loyalty unwavering. "What will you do?" Caesar turned to face his officers, his eyes burning with cold determination. "We will not leave Egypt until this is resolved. Ptolemy has made his move, but it is a weak one. The real ruler of this land is not the boy who sits on that throne, it is Cleopatra." There was a murmur of understanding among the officers. Cleopatra, though exiled by her younger brother, had long been known for her cunning and intelligence. She was not one to be dismissed lightly, and Caesar knew that aligning with her could change the course of Egypt's future, and his own. "We will find Cleopatra," Caesar continued, his mind already calculating the next steps. "If Egypt is to be an ally of Rome, it must be ruled by someone strong enough to keep it from falling apart. Ptolemy is weak, and weakness is something Rome cannot afford." Antonius grinned, the thought of action invigorating him. "And what of Ptolemy's advisors? Pothinus and Achilles?" "They will answer for their crimes in time," Caesar said, his voice hard as steel. "But first, we must secure the loyalty of Cleopatra. Only then can we deal with the rot at the heart of this kingdom." As they spoke, a soft wind blew in from the sea, carrying with it the distant sounds of Alexandria's bustling markets and streets. The city, though magnificent, was a powder keg waiting to explode. Caesar could feel it in the air, the tension, the unrest. The people whispered of Cleopatra, of Ptolemy's weakness, and of the looming shadow of Rome. Caesar's eyes narrowed as he thought of the path ahead. Pompey's death had been a wound not just to him personally, but to the honor of Rome itself. There would be no mercy for those who dared to insult the Republic in such a way. Ptolemy would learn the cost of betrayal. "I want an audience with Ptolemy again," Caesar said sharply, turning to Antonius. "We will meet at the palace. And this time, we will remind him who holds the true power here." Antonius nodded, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "Shall we bring the legion with us?" Caesar shook his head. "Not yet. There is still value in playing this carefully. But make sure our soldiers are prepared. I do not trust Ptolemy's advisors to act wisely." Antonius grinned again, pleased at the prospect of action. "It will be done." As Caesar turned back toward the palace, his cloak whipping behind him in the wind, his fury had not subsided, it had only focused. Ptolemy's cowardice would not go unanswered. Egypt was a land ripe for conquest, and Caesar had no intention of leaving it in the hands of children and schemers. This was not only a battle for Egypt, but for the future of Rome itself. And Julius Caesar, master of strategy, would not rest until the last vestiges of betrayal were wiped away, and the true ruler of Egypt stood by his side. With that thought in mind, he strode forward, his eyes fixed on the palace looming ahead, knowing that soon, all of Egypt would bend to his will. The vast, arid deserts of Egypt stretched out endlessly, their golden sands shimmering under the relentless heat of the midday sun. Far from the opulence of Alexandria's palace, Cleopatra XII, the deposed queen of Egypt, paced restlessly inside her modest hideaway. Her once glorious reign, now reduced to this, an exile in the wilderness, stripped of power by her own younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. The queen's eyes, dark and sharp with intelligence, flickered with determination as she looked out over the desolate landscape. The wind carried with it grains of sand, swirling like a reminder of the fleeting nature of power in this ancient land. Cleopatra was young, not yet 20, but already the weight of betrayal, intrigue, and politics lay heavily upon her shoulders. Though exiled, Cleopatra had not lost her sense of purpose. She would not remain in this wasteland forever. In her heart, she knew Egypt needed a strong ruler, a queen who understood the delicate balance between Egyptian tradition and the rising might of Rome. And that queen was not her brother. Her loyal servant, Apollodorus, entered the room quietly. He had served Cleopatra faithfully throughout her exile, always at her side, his loyalty unwavering. Apollodorus, a man of Greek descent, was both a confidant and an ally, willing to risk everything to see her restored to power. Cleopatra, Apollodorus began, his voice low but urgent. Word has reached us from Alexandria. Caesar has arrived. At the mention of Caesar, Cleopatra paused, her mind racing. The Roman general, conqueror of Gaul, was a man of unmatched ambition and influence. His presence in Egypt meant the balance of power was shifting, and Cleopatra knew that this was her moment to act. Caesar, she repeated softly, her thoughts swirling with possibilities. He is the key. Apollodorus nodded. He came to Alexandria pursuing Pompey, but now that Pompey is dead, Caesar's focus will be on securing Egypt for Rome. Ptolemy will try to win his favor, but Caesar is not a man easily swayed. Cleopatra's lips curved into a faint smile. Ptolemy is a fool, and his advisors are even greater fools. They think they can manipulate Caesar. But Rome respects strength, not cowardice. Apollodorus stepped closer, his eyes alight with understanding. If you can secure Caesar's support, the throne is yours. Ptolemy has made a critical mistake by aligning himself with those who betrayed Pompey. Cleopatra turned away from the window, her thoughts now focused on the future. She had studied Caesar from afar, learning of his victories, his strategies, and his appetite for power. He was a man who respected boldness, and Cleopatra was prepared to be bold. I will meet Caesar, she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. But not as an exile. I will meet him as a queen. Apollodorus frowned slightly, uncertain. How will you reach him? Ptolemy's forces control the palace, and the roads to Alexandria are dangerous. They will not allow you to walk back into the city. Cleopatra's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with a spark of mischief. We will use the element of surprise, Apollodorus. If I cannot walk into the palace, I will be carried in. I have heard of Caesar's fondness for theatrics. Let us give him a spectacle he will not forget. Apollodorus raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you have in mind? Cleopatra moved toward the center of the room, her thoughts already forming a plan. We will smuggle me into the palace, wrapped in a rug. You will deliver me to Caesar as a gift. Once I am in his presence, I will speak to him directly. He will see that I am not some child playing at politics, but a queen worthy of his alliance. Apollodorus hesitated for only a moment before nodding. It is a bold plan. Caesar will admire your cunning. Cleopatra's smile faded, replaced by a look of fierce determination. I have no choice but to be bold, Apollodorus. My brother may have taken my throne, but he has not taken my will. I will not allow Egypt to fall into ruin under his rule." She turned to her servant, her voice now filled with urgency. "Prepare everything. We leave for Alexandria at once." As Apollodorus left to make the necessary arrangements, Cleopatra stood alone for a moment, her heart racing with anticipation. She knew the risks involved in this plan. If Ptolemy discovered her plot before she reached Caesar, she could be captured or even killed. But Cleopatra had always believed that fortune favored the brave. She would not cower in exile while her kingdom slipped further into chaos. Cleopatra, even in the isolation of exile, was more than a queen. She was a leader, a ruler born of both the blood of Ptolemaic Egypt and the knowledge of Greek philosophy and Roman politics. She understood power, and she understood men like Caesar. If she could win his support, she could reclaim her throne and reshape Egypt in her image, a powerful, prosperous kingdom allied with the greatest empire of the age. Hours later, as the sun began to set over the sands of Egypt, Apollodorus returned with a large rolled rug and a small group of trusted men. Cleopatra regarded the rug with amusement before nodding to her servant. "It is perfect," she said, with practiced efficiency. The men began to wrap Cleopatra inside the rug, careful not to harm her as they secured the bundle. Apollodorus stood by, ready to play his part in this dangerous game. Once the rug was secured, he motioned for his men to lift it. "As soon as we reach Caesar, I will present you to him," Apollodorus said. "And from there, the future will be yours to shape." Cleopatra's voice emerged from within the rug, calm and unwavering. "Yes. And when I rise again, Egypt will rise with me." With that, the small group set out into the night, making their way toward Alexandria, where destiny awaited. As they traveled through the darkness, Cleopatra's thoughts were focused on one man, Julius Caesar. The meeting would change everything. She knew it. And she was ready. In the quiet seclusion of her exile, Cleopatra XII sat in the dim light of her chambers, her mind working tirelessly, piecing together her plan. Every step had to be perfect. This was her chance, not only to reclaim her throne but to secure Egypt's future as a powerful and independent kingdom under her rule. The key to her success lay in one man, Julius Caesar. Cleopatra knew that winning Caesar's favor was the only way to overthrow her brother Ptolemy XIII, whose weak leadership had allowed Egypt to descend into chaos. But this was no simple task. Caesar was a man who had conquered vast lands, who had defeated Rome's greatest general, Pompey, and who now held the fate of Egypt in his hands. Cleopatra needed more than just charm or diplomacy. She needed a plan bold enough to capture Caesar's attention and trust. Her trusted servant and confidant, Apollodorus, stood before her, waiting for her next instructions. A tall, wiry man of Greek descent, Apollodorus had been with Cleopatra through thick and thin, and his loyalty was unwavering. He had served her during her rule, and now, in exile, he remained her most reliable ally. "Apollodorus," Cleopatra began, her voice calm but filled with determination. "The time has come. Caesar is in Alexandria, and this is our moment to act." Apollodorus inclined his head slightly. "What do you wish of me, my queen?" Cleopatra stood and moved toward the window, looking out over the expanse of the desert. The heat of the day had faded, leaving a cool breeze in its wake. She took a deep breath before speaking. "I will meet Caesar," she said firmly. "But not as a deposed queen or an exile. I will meet him as the true ruler of Egypt, and I will prove to him that I am worthy of his support." Apollodorus frowned slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face. "But Caesar is within the walls of Alexandria, surrounded by Ptolemy's men. It will not be easy to reach him, my queen. Ptolemy will not allow you near Caesar without his knowledge." Cleopatra's lips curled into a smile, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of cunning and resolve. "That is precisely why we will not approach him directly. We will use guile, Apollodorus. If I cannot walk into Caesar's presence, I will be carried there." Apollodorus tilted his head, intrigued. "Carried?" Cleopatra turned to face him fully now, her gaze sharp. "Yes. You will smuggle me into the palace, wrapped inside a rug. Present me to Caesar as a gift. Once I am in his chambers, I will speak to him directly." The boldness of the plan caught Apollodorus off guard, but as the full weight of Cleopatra's scheme settled in his mind, he began to see its brilliance. Caesar, a man known for his taste for theatrics and spectacle, would no doubt be intrigued by such a dramatic entrance. And once Cleopatra was in his presence, her intelligence, charm, and political acumen would do the rest. Apollodorus allowed himself a brief smile. "It is a daring plan, my queen. Caesar will admire your audacity." Cleopatra's smile widened. "He will see that I am no mere puppet or child, as Ptolemy is. He will see that I am a queen capable of ruling a kingdom like Egypt, and more." She stepped away from the window, her mind now racing through the details of the plot. "We will need to act swiftly. The longer we wait, the more Ptolemy's advisors, Pothinus and Achillas, will tighten their grip on Caesar. They seek to control him, to use him as a tool for their own gain. But Caesar is not a man to be controlled." Apollodorus nodded, his own sense of urgency growing. "And what of Ptolemy? He will not be pleased when he discovers that you have met with Caesar behind his back." Cleopatra's expression hardened. "Ptolemy is a child playing at politics. His advisors are the true threat. But with Caesar's support, I will have the strength to face them, and to reclaim what is rightfully mine." There was no doubt in Cleopatra's mind that this plan would succeed. She had spent years studying the ways of politics, both in Egypt and in Rome, learning the art of persuasion and manipulation. She had seen firsthand how power shifted, how alliances were made and broken. Caesar was a man who valued strength, intelligence, and ambition, qualities she possessed in abundance. "Apollodorus," Cleopatra said, her voice soft but commanding, "prepare the rug. We leave for Alexandria at dawn." Apollodorus bowed deeply. "As you wish, my queen." As he left the room to make the necessary preparations, Cleopatra took a moment to steady herself. The weight of the task ahead was immense, but she had never been one to shy away from a challenge. This was her moment, a chance to rise from the ashes of exile and reclaim her destiny. In the hours that followed, the palace in Alexandria buzzed with the news of Caesar's arrival. Ptolemy's court was in disarray, unsure how to proceed in the presence of such a powerful Roman general. Cleopatra knew that her brother's advisors would try to curry favor with Caesar, but they underestimated the man they were dealing with. Caesar did not respect weakness, and Ptolemy's court reeked of it. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Apollodorus returned with the large rolled rug, expertly woven and sturdy enough to hide Cleopatra inside. His men had already gathered, ready to accompany them on the dangerous journey into the heart of Alexandria. Cleopatra looked at the rug with satisfaction, then nodded to Apollodorus. "This will do." Apollodorus gave her a brief smile. "I have ensured that the guards at the palace gate will not suspect anything. They believe the rug is a gift for Caesar." Cleopatra smiled in return, her mind already picturing the moment she would emerge from the rug, face to face with the man who held her future in his hands. "Perfect. Now let us go before the sun rises fully. We have much to do." As Cleopatra stepped toward the rug, Apollodorus and his men carefully began to wrap her inside. The queen felt the soft folds of the fabric encase her, the tightness of the material pressing against her body. It was a strange sensation, to be hidden away like a mere object, but Cleopatra did not let it bother her. This was a means to an end, a tool in the larger game she was playing. Once the rug was secured, Apollodorus and his men lifted it carefully, their movements steady and controlled. Cleopatra, now hidden from view, felt the subtle sway of the rug as they began their journey toward the palace. The streets of Alexandria were still quiet as they moved through the city, the early morning light casting long shadows across the ground. Apollodorus walked with confidence, his men surrounding the rug as if it were any ordinary gift meant for a powerful guest. As they approached the palace gates, the guards eyed them briefly but made no move to stop them. Apollodorus gave a polite nod and spoke in a measured tone. "A gift for Caesar, from the queen." The guards exchanged glances but said nothing. They waved the group through, allowing them entry into the grand halls of the palace. Cleopatra felt her heart race as they crossed the threshold. The palace walls echoed with the sound of footsteps and the distant murmur of Ptolemy's court, but all of that faded as they neared Caesar's chambers. Apollodorus stopped just outside the entrance, his voice calm but firm as he addressed the guard stationed there. "I bring a gift for Caesar. A token of Egypt's gratitude." With a nod, the doors were opened, and Apollodorus stepped inside, the rug carried carefully behind him. As they entered the room, Cleopatra knew that the next few moments would determine the course of her future. Soon, she would be standing before Caesar himself, and she would seize the opportunity with all the strength and cunning she possessed. The halls of Alexandria's royal palace were a testament to the grandeur and decadence of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Tall columns adorned with carvings of ancient gods loomed overhead, and the scent of incense lingered in the air. Yet, as the sun began to climb over the city, casting a warm golden light through the palace windows, a far more significant event was about to unfold within these opulent walls, one that would forever change the fate of Egypt and the Roman world. Inside a lavishly decorated chamber, Julius Caesar sat at a marble table, surveying maps and reports from his campaigns. His brow furrowed in concentration, his mind focused on the political intricacies of the land he now found himself in. Egypt, while rich and powerful, was mired in turmoil, and Caesar knew that the loyalty of its rulers could be as fleeting as the shifting sands of the desert. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. A palace guard entered, bowing deeply before addressing the Roman general. "General Caesar, a gift has been brought for you. From the Queen of Egypt." Caesar, always intrigued by political gestures, looked up. "A gift, you say? Bring it in." With a wave of his hand, the guard motioned to Apollodorus, who entered the room with a small entourage, carrying a large, intricately woven rug. Caesar's sharp eyes followed their every movement as the group approached. "This," Apollodorus began with a flourish, "is a token of Queen Cleopatra's appreciation for your presence in Egypt, a gift from her royal household." Caesar stood from his chair, walking slowly toward the rug, his curiosity piqued. He had heard rumors of Cleopatra, the deposed queen, a woman of intelligence and ambition who had been cast aside by her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Caesar had expected her to approach him in some way, to seek an alliance that would help her reclaim her throne. But this was unexpected. "A fine gift," Caesar remarked, his voice low and contemplative. He motioned for Apollodorus and the guards to lay the rug on the floor. The men gently unrolled the rug, revealing the vibrant colors and masterful craftsmanship. But as the final layer was unfurled, Caesar's breath caught in his throat. From within the folds of the rug, Cleopatra herself emerged, her movements graceful, her eyes meeting Caesar's with calm determination. The room fell silent. For a moment, Caesar simply stared at the woman before him. Cleopatra's striking presence filled the chamber, her dark, kohl-lined eyes gleaming with intelligence and ambition. Her regal bearing, even after being smuggled into his quarters like a hidden treasure, was undeniable. The Queen of Egypt had made her entrance, both audacious and unforgettable. Cleopatra stood tall, her gaze unwavering as she addressed Caesar. "General Caesar," she began, her voice soft but steady, "I am Cleopatra, rightful Queen of Egypt. I come to you seeking your support, not as a supplicant, but as an equal. Egypt needs a strong ruler, someone who can maintain order and honor Rome's interests. I am that ruler." Caesar's initial surprise gave way to admiration. He could see the brilliance of the scheme. Her entrance was both a plea for help and a demonstration of her cunning. She had risked everything to meet him in secret, bypassing her enemies and the treachery of her own court. Here was a woman who understood the stakes of power and was willing to seize control of her destiny. With a faint smile playing on his lips, Caesar approached her. "You are bold, Cleopatra. To be smuggled into my chambers in such a manner, that is no small act." Cleopatra's eyes flickered with confidence. "Boldness, General, is sometimes the only path to victory. My brother seeks to control you through flattery and cowardice. But I offer you an alliance that will benefit both Rome and Egypt." Caesar regarded her for a long moment, taking in the full measure of the young queen before him. He had encountered many rulers in his time, but none quite like Cleopatra. Her audacity, her intelligence, and her beauty, there was no denying that she possessed a rare combination of qualities that could reshape the course of Egypt's future. "And what would you have me do, Queen Cleopatra?" Caesar asked, his tone more serious now, though still laced with curiosity. "Help me reclaim my throne," Cleopatra said without hesitation. "Support me in becoming the sole ruler of Egypt, and in return, you will have my loyalty, and the loyalty of my people. Together, we can stabilize this kingdom and ensure that Egypt remains a strong and prosperous ally of Rome." Caesar considered her words carefully. He was no stranger to political alliances, and he knew that Cleopatra's offer carried great weight. Egypt was a land of immense wealth and resources, and securing Cleopatra as its ruler would ensure Rome's influence over one of the most strategically important regions of the Mediterranean. But more than that, Caesar saw in Cleopatra a kindred spirit, someone who understood the complexities of power and the need for decisive action. After a moment of silence, Caesar gave a slow nod. "Your offer is intriguing, Cleopatra. I will help you reclaim your throne. But know this, you will owe your power to Rome, and to me." Cleopatra smiled, her victory all but assured. "Of course, General. I have no illusions about the nature of power. But rest assured, as long as I rule Egypt, you will have no more loyal ally than me." Caesar took a step closer to her, his eyes searching hers for any sign of deception. But Cleopatra did not waver. She had played her hand with precision, and now the future of Egypt lay within her grasp. "You have courage, Cleopatra," Caesar said quietly, almost admiringly. "And I have always respected those who are willing to take risks for the sake of their people." Cleopatra inclined her head slightly. "And I, General, respect those who recognize opportunity when it presents itself." The tension between them hung in the air for a moment longer before Caesar turned and motioned to one of his attendants. "Make preparations," he commanded. "We will speak further in the morning. But for now, ensure that Queen Cleopatra is given all the hospitality of this palace." As the attendants moved to obey, Cleopatra allowed herself a brief moment of relief. She had done it, she had won Caesar's favor, and with his support, her path back to the throne was clear. But Cleopatra also knew that this was only the beginning. She would need to remain vigilant, to continue proving herself worthy of Caesar's trust. The game of politics was far from over. As she was escorted from the chamber, Cleopatra glanced back at Caesar, her mind already calculating her next moves. With Rome's might behind her, she would not only reclaim Egypt, she would reshape its future in her image. The warmth of the Egyptian sun had already begun to rise over the city of Alexandria as Julius Caesar stood on the palace balcony, gazing out over the bustling harbor below. The sound of traders and sailors echoed through the morning air, but his mind was elsewhere, on the woman he had met the night before, Cleopatra, the deposed queen of Egypt who had audaciously smuggled herself into his quarters wrapped in a rug. There was something about her that Caesar couldn't quite shake from his thoughts. She wasn't just a ruler fighting for her throne, she was a woman of extraordinary presence, intelligence, and ambition. Caesar had seen many leaders, men and women alike, bend under the weight of power, but Cleopatra seemed different. Her audacity and willingness to risk everything impressed him. More than that, he was drawn to her beauty and charm, qualities she wielded with the same precision as her political mind. As Caesar contemplated the future of Egypt, his thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Cleopatra herself. She entered the room with the grace of a queen, her figure adorned in royal garments that accentuated her regal air. Yet there was a softness in her demeanor, a warmth that contrasted with the coldness of palace politics. General Caesar, she greeted him with a smile, her voice smooth as silk. "I hope you have had time to consider my offer." Caesar turned to face her fully, studying her as if trying to read her deeper intentions. "I have," he said, his voice steady. "You are bold, Cleopatra. I admire that. But you must understand the risks involved in challenging your brother and his advisors. Their loyalty to you is uncertain." Cleopatra moved closer, her gaze unwavering. "I am not afraid of risks, Caesar. I've taken many already. What I seek now is more than just survival. I seek to restore order to my kingdom and ensure Egypt's future as a stable, independent power. With your support, we can achieve that." There was a moment of silence between them, the weight of their conversation filling the air. Caesar could sense the underlying intensity of Cleopatra's ambition. She wasn't just a queen looking to reclaim a throne. She was a leader who understood the intricacies of politics, someone who could be a valuable ally in the complex web of Roman power. Cleopatra's eyes flickered with a mix of sincerity and strategic calculation as she spoke again. "You and I both know that my brother, Ptolemy, is little more than a puppet controlled by his advisors, Pothinus and Achilles. They seek to manipulate Egypt's throne for their own gain, not for the good of the kingdom or Rome. I, on the other hand, am ready to offer you Egypt's loyalty, true loyalty." Caesar nodded, still weighing the options in his mind. Cleopatra's words rang true. Ptolemy's rule was weak, undermined by his advisors, and a divided Egypt would only lead to chaos in the region. Aligning with Cleopatra not only ensured a stable ruler in Egypt but also secured a powerful ally who understood the stakes of Rome's influence. "And what of your brother?" Caesar asked, his tone careful. "If I support you, he will surely see it as an act of betrayal." Cleopatra's lips curled into a faint smile, her confidence unwavering. "Ptolemy is young and easily swayed. His loyalty is fickle at best, and he will follow whichever path keeps him in power. But that is precisely why he cannot be allowed to rule alone. Egypt needs strength and wisdom, qualities he does not possess. I do." Her words hung in the air, and Caesar could feel the pull of her ambition. There was no doubt in his mind that Cleopatra was more than capable of ruling, and perhaps that was what intrigued him most. He had met many rulers, but few had the same clarity of vision, the same unrelenting determination to secure their place in history. As he looked at her, Caesar found himself captivated not just by her political acumen, but by her beauty and presence. Cleopatra was unlike any woman he had ever encountered. Her mixture of intellect, charm, and fearlessness made her irresistible. The tension between them was undeniable, and Caesar realized that his interest in Cleopatra extended beyond mere politics. "I believe in your cause, Cleopatra," Caesar said after a long pause. "You are right, Egypt needs a strong ruler, and Rome needs a stable ally. I will support you in reclaiming your throne. Together, we can secure Egypt's future and ensure its prosperity under your leadership." Cleopatra's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She had won. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. Securing Caesar's support was one step toward her larger goal, ruling Egypt not only as its queen but as a leader who could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful empire in the world. "Thank you, Caesar," Cleopatra said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "You will not regret this decision. With your help, we will make Egypt stronger than ever." Caesar nodded, but even as he agreed to support Cleopatra's claim, he couldn't ignore the growing attraction he felt toward her. There was something magnetic about the way she carried herself, the way she spoke with such confidence and grace. And Cleopatra, for her part, was fully aware of Caesar's admiration. She could sense his growing infatuation, and she knew how to use it to her advantage. As they continued to discuss the details of their alliance, Cleopatra leaned closer to Caesar, her tone softening. "Of course, this alliance will benefit both of us, Caesar. Egypt's wealth and resources will be at Rome's disposal, and in return, I will ensure that Rome's interests are safeguarded here." Caesar met her gaze, his expression serious but tinged with something more personal. "You speak of politics, Cleopatra, but I sense there is more to this than just power and strategy." Cleopatra's smile was knowing, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. "Power, General, comes in many forms. But the strongest alliances are forged not just in strategy, but in trust and understanding." There was a charged moment of silence between them, and Caesar felt the weight of her words. He knew that Cleopatra was playing a dangerous game, but he couldn't deny the allure of it, or the allure of her. "I trust you, Cleopatra," Caesar said, his voice low. "And I understand the risks involved in supporting your claim. But I also understand the rewards." Cleopatra's smile deepened, and she took a step closer to Caesar, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then let us not waste any more time, General. Together, we can achieve greatness, for Egypt and for Rome." The unspoken attraction between them lingered in the air, and Caesar found himself drawn into Cleopatra's orbit, captivated by her beauty, her intelligence, and her undeniable charisma. He had come to Egypt for politics, but now he found himself entangled in something far more personal, an affair that would shape the course of history. As the morning sun continued to rise over Alexandria, Caesar and Cleopatra began to solidify their plans for Egypt's future. But beneath the surface of their political alliance, a powerful connection was growing, one that would bind them together in ways neither of them had fully anticipated. The atmosphere in the grand hall of the Alexandria Palace was thick with tension as Julius Caesar prepared to confront Ptolemy XIII. The once gleaming chamber, adorned with rich tapestries and gold inlays, now felt like a stage set for a confrontation that would determine the future of Egypt. As Caesar stood at the head of the hall, flanked by his officers and Cleopatra, he surveyed the gathering of nobles and advisors who filled the space. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they awaited the fate of their young king, still a mere boy under the manipulative influence of Pothinus and Achilles. Cleopatra stood beside Caesar, radiating confidence, her eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and determination. The doors of the hall swung open, and Ptolemy was ushered in, his youthful face betraying a mix of confusion and fear. He was dressed in regal attire, the insignia of the Ptolemaic dynasty emblazoned on his breast, but his demeanor spoke of the instability that surrounded him. His eyes darted around the hall, settling on Caesar and then flicking to Cleopatra, who met his gaze without flinching. "General Caesar," Ptolemy began, his voice trembling, "I am honored by your presence in my kingdom." Caesar regarded the boy with a stern expression. "Your rule has brought turmoil to Egypt, Ptolemy. You have been a king in name only, a puppet of those who seek to exploit your position for their own gain." Ptolemy's face flushed, and he opened his mouth to protest, but Caesar raised a hand, silencing him. "Your advisors, Pothinus and Achilles, have manipulated you, leading you to believe that your authority is unchallenged. But the truth is plain to see. Your people are suffering, and Egypt cannot prosper under your leadership." As the murmurs of agreement swept through the crowd, Cleopatra stepped forward, her voice clear and resolute. "My brother," she began, "I do not take this lightly. I have no desire to see you harmed. But the time has come for a true ruler to ascend the throne, someone who will prioritize the welfare of our people and restore stability to Egypt." Ptolemy's eyes widened in disbelief. "You would betray me, Cleopatra? You would ally with a foreign invader against your own flesh and blood?" Cleopatra's expression softened, but her resolve remained. "This is not a betrayal, but a necessity. I have fought for Egypt's future, while you have chosen to hide behind those who seek to use you. You deserve a chance to grow, to learn, but you cannot do so from this throne, not while your advisors manipulate you." The hall erupted with murmurs, the nobles torn between loyalty to their young king and the promise of a stronger future under Cleopatra. Caesar stepped forward, addressing the crowd. "I have seen the qualities of leadership in Cleopatra. She possesses the vision and strength that Egypt needs. Under her rule, Egypt will thrive and will stand as a formidable ally of Rome." Ptolemy, realizing he was losing the support of those present, turned to Caesar, desperation evident in his voice. "You cannot do this. I am the king. You are a Roman general in my palace." Caesar's gaze hardened. "And you are a king with no power. This is not a matter of titles, it is about the future of a nation. You have failed to lead, and as a result, I cannot endorse your rule any longer." The whispers grew louder, the tide of support shifting toward Cleopatra. In that moment, Ptolemy saw his precarious position and the inevitability of his downfall. He looked to the crowd for support, but they were no longer his allies. The faces of his once loyal advisors were filled with uncertainty and concern. Cleopatra took a step forward, her voice steady. "You can choose to leave the throne in dignity, brother, or you can fight me, but know this, I will not see Egypt suffer because of your weakness. The choice is yours." Ptolemy, feeling the weight of their gazes upon him, finally looked back at Cleopatra with a mixture of resentment and sorrow. "You have won this day, sister. But know that this is not the end of my reign." With that, he turned and walked away, shoulders slumped under the burden of defeat. The nobles parted for him, their allegiance already shifting as they turned to Cleopatra and Caesar, Eager to embrace the new order. As Ptolemy left the hall, Caesar raised his hand, commanding silence once more. It is with great honor that I declare Cleopatra XII as the sole ruler of Egypt, under the watchful eye of Rome. May her reign bring peace and prosperity to our land. A wave of approval swept through the hall as Cleopatra stepped forward, her face illuminated with triumph. The murmurs of agreement transformed into cheers, echoing off the marble walls as she raised her hands, embracing the moment. Together, we will build a new Egypt, Cleopatra proclaimed, her voice strong and clear. A kingdom that stands united, powerful, and proud. With Rome as our ally, we will ensure that Egypt thrives. The crowd erupted in applause, and Cleopatra felt the swell of support wash over her, bolstering her confidence. She had fought for this moment, and now it was hers. As Caesar watched Cleopatra bask in her victory, he felt a mix of admiration and intrigue. This young woman had not only secured her throne but had also captured the hearts of her people. He realized that he had aligned himself with someone who would become a formidable partner, not just politically, but perhaps in ways he had yet to comprehend. The fall of Ptolemy marked the rise of Cleopatra, a queen who was not only willing to fight for her throne but who possessed the strength to command it. The sands of Egypt had shifted, and with them, the tide of history began to turn. The vibrant colors of the sunset bathed the palace in a warm glow, casting long shadows across the marble floor of Cleopatra's private quarters. It was a chamber that reflected her spirit, richly adorned with intricate tapestries depicting the gods of Egypt, delicate glassware that caught the light, and fragrant incense wafting through the air. This space was both a sanctuary and a stage, a place where her dual roles as queen and woman would intertwine. Julius Caesar stood by the window, gazing out at the bustling city of Alexandria below. He could hear the distant sounds of laughter and music from the celebrations that had erupted in the streets following Cleopatra's ascension to the throne. The palace was alive with the energy of a renewed Egypt, a place that pulsed with hope and possibility. "General," Cleopatra said softly, breaking his reverie as she entered the room. She wore a flowing gown of deep azure silk that accentuated her striking features and regal bearing. The way she moved through the chamber was fluid and captivating, her presence commanding yet inviting. Caesar turned to face her, a smile breaking across his lips. "Your Highness," he replied, his voice warm, "the people celebrate your victory. You are their queen, and they adore you." Cleopatra's expression shifted, a mixture of pride and seriousness crossing her features. "I owe this victory not just to my own ambition, but to you, Julius. Your support has been invaluable, and I am grateful." Stepping closer, she placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle yet electrifying. "But we both know that our alliance goes beyond politics. We must solidify our bond, not just as ruler and ally, but as partners in this new venture." Caesar's gaze held hers, the intensity of the moment palpable. "You speak of a partnership, Cleopatra. You have already proven yourself to be a remarkable leader, and I wish to be by your side in this endeavor. But what kind of partnership do you envision?" A playful smile danced across Cleopatra's lips. "One that intertwines our fates, General. An alliance that binds Egypt and Rome, and which allows us to rule together. I have much to offer, and I believe we can create something extraordinary." Her words were charged with promise, and Caesar felt a stirring in his heart. He had faced countless political challenges, but this was different. Cleopatra was not just a queen, she was a woman who had captured his imagination and ignited a passion within him that he had not felt in years. "Cleopatra," he began, his voice low, "to forge such a bond requires trust and understanding. Our worlds are vastly different, and yet, there is a connection between us that is undeniable." She stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with determination. "Trust can only be built through honesty, Julius. I want you to see me as I truly am, not just as the Queen of Egypt, but as Cleopatra, a woman with dreams and desires. I wish to share my life with you, in every sense of the word." Her invitation hung in the air, tempting and bold. Caesar could feel the weight of her gaze, the way it pierced through the walls he had built around his heart. He was a man accustomed to power and control, yet before Cleopatra, he found himself willingly surrendering to the pull of their connection. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Then let us forge this alliance, Cleopatra. Let us be partners in every way that matters." In that moment, Cleopatra took his hand and led him to a lavishly adorned divan, where cushions piled high invited them to sit. The soft glow of oil lamps flickered around them, casting a warm light that accentuated the beauty of the room, and of each other. As they settled onto the divan, Cleopatra leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper. "We will navigate the treacherous waters of politics together, Julius. We will build a future that will be remembered in the annals of history." Caesar studied her, captivated by the resolve in her eyes. "And what future do you envision, my queen?" "A future where Egypt is strong, where our people flourish, and where our union stands as a testament to the power of collaboration," she replied, her voice filled with passion. "And yes, a future where we are free to explore what lies between us, unbound by the expectations of our positions." With her words, the air between them thickened with unspoken desire. Caesar could feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of their intentions. He reached out, brushing his fingers against her cheek, tracing the curve of her jawline. Cleopatra closed her eyes at his touch, leaning into it as if savoring the connection. "I have fought for my kingdom, but you are the first man who has ever made me feel like a true partner," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "With you, I feel invincible. And with you, I feel alive again," Caesar replied, his heart racing as he leaned closer, their lips almost brushing. "Let us seal our alliance, Cleopatra, not just with words but with the fire that ignites within us." At that moment, Cleopatra closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a kiss that held the promise of their shared future. It was a kiss filled with passion and longing, a melding of two powerful forces, each bringing their strengths to the union. As they pulled away, breathless and captivated, Cleopatra smiled, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Together, we will be unstoppable. The world will remember our names." Caesar chuckled softly, a mix of admiration and desire in his gaze. "They already will. We are writing our own history, Cleopatra, and I have no intention of letting it be forgotten." With newfound determination, they set to work, discussing the steps they would take to strengthen their alliance, to stabilize Egypt, and to ensure that their bond became the foundation for a new era. As the night deepened, the palace pulsed with life and celebration outside, but within the walls of Cleopatra's chamber, a different kind of celebration was unfolding, one of passion, ambition, and the forging of an indelible alliance that would echo throughout time. The Palace of Alexandria was alive with anticipation and a palpable energy that coursed through the halls like electricity. Word had spread quickly that Cleopatra was in labor, and the atmosphere was a mix of excitement and anxiety. In the royal birthing chamber, the air was thick with the scents of jasmine and myrrh, mingling with the faint sounds of chants and prayers offered by the attendants who surrounded the queen. Cleopatra lay on a bed draped in silks, her face a portrait of strength and determination. She gripped the hand of her trusted servant, Apollodorus, who remained at her side, whispering words of encouragement. The queen's brow glistened with perspiration, but her resolve was unyielding. This child was not just a testament to her love for Julius Caesar, it was a symbol of her ambition, a new chapter for Egypt. "Breathe, my queen," Apollodorus urged gently, his voice steady amidst the chaos. "You are strong. You have fought for everything that has led to this moment." "Indeed," Cleopatra replied, her voice strained yet filled with conviction. "This child will unite our destinies, Apollodorus. I will not let fear take hold of me now." As the pain surged through her, Cleopatra closed her eyes, summoning the strength that had always defined her. She thought of Caesar, of his unwavering support, and of the dreams they had shared for Egypt. This child would be their legacy, a bridge between two worlds. After what felt like an eternity, the tension in the room peaked. The midwife, an experienced woman known for her skill, took charge, her voice firm and soothing as she guided Cleopatra through the final moments of labor. The other attendants moved in a practiced rhythm, preparing for the moment that would change everything. "Just one more push, Cleopatra," the midwife instructed, her eyes locked onto the queen's. "You can do this. Let the power of the queen flow through you." With a fierce determination, Cleopatra pushed, her muscles straining, her spirit aflame. In that moment, she drew upon every ounce of her will, channeling her strength into bringing forth new life. The cries of the newborn echoed through the chamber, piercing the tension that had gripped the air. A collective gasp of wonder filled the room as the midwife held the baby up, a small bundle of life wrapped in fine linen. "It is a boy," she announced, her voice filled with joy. "Queen Cleopatra, you have given birth to a son." The sound of the infant's cries filled the chamber, a powerful reminder of the life that had just begun. Cleopatra's heart swelled with love and pride as the midwife brought the child closer. With trembling hands, she took her son, cradling him against her chest, her tears of joy spilling freely. "I shall name him Caesar Ion," Cleopatra declared, her voice firm and proud. "He will carry the name of his father and the legacy of our union." Apollodorus stepped forward, a wide smile breaking across his face. "He is a beautiful boy, Your Highness. He will be a mighty ruler one day, a symbol of your strength and ambition." Cleopatra gazed down at her son, his tiny fingers grasping at the air, his features a delicate blend of her beauty and Caesar's strength. In that moment, she envisioned a future where Caesar Ion would grow to be a leader, a beacon of hope for Egypt, a bridge between two powerful nations. I will ensure he is raised to understand the weight of his heritage, Cleopatra vowed, her voice resolute. He will learn the ways of both Egypt and Rome, and he will carry the ambitions of both worlds upon his shoulders. As the attendants fussed around her, preparing the room for a new era, Cleopatra felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. She had not only given birth to a child, she had birthed a new beginning for Egypt. Caesarion would be the embodiment of her dreams and aspirations, a child destined to leave an indelible mark on history. In the days that followed, the palace buzzed with the news of the royal birth. Celebrations erupted across Alexandria, as the people rejoiced at the arrival of their future leader. Banners were hung, and feasts were prepared in honor of Cleopatra and her newborn son. When Caesar returned from his duties, the sight of Cleopatra cradling their son filled him with an indescribable joy. He stepped into the chamber, and as Cleopatra met his gaze, she saw the love and pride reflected in his eyes. Caesarion, she whispered, her heart swelling at the thought of their child, a living testament to their bond. He is the future of Egypt, our future. Caesar knelt beside Cleopatra, brushing his fingers over the baby's tiny hand. He is perfect, he murmured, a smile breaking across his face. This child will be our legacy, Cleopatra. Together, we will ensure that he understands the significance of his name and the power of our alliance. The bond between them deepened in that moment, a shared understanding of the monumental journey that lay ahead. They were not just lovers or rulers, they were parents, united in their ambition to build a new world for their son, one that combined the strength of Rome and the grace of Egypt. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light into the chamber, Cleopatra felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would fight for her son's future, just as she had fought for her own. Caesarion was more than a child, he was a promise of what was to come, a beacon of hope amidst the tumultuous tides of history. The sun rose over Alexandria, casting a warm glow across the city, a sharp contrast to the turmoil brewing in the political arena of Rome. In the royal palace, Julius Caesar stood by the window of Cleopatra's chambers, gazing out at the bustling streets below. The joyous celebrations surrounding the birth of his son, Caesarion, had filled the air with a sense of optimism, but he could not shake the weight of duty pressing upon him. Julius, Cleopatra said softly, entering the room with a look of concern etched on her face. You seem lost in thought. What troubles you? Caesar turned to her, his expression serious. I have received word from Rome. The Senate is in disarray, and the Republic is on the brink of chaos. They require my presence to restore order. Cleopatra's heart sank at his words, the implications settling heavily in the air. She stepped closer, the warmth of her body a comfort against the chill of uncertainty. You must go, she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil within her. The Republic needs you, and your people will not wait for your return. I do not want to leave you or our son, Caesar admitted, his voice thick with emotion. You have become my anchor, Cleopatra. The thought of being away from you both is unbearable. Her gaze softened, understanding the conflict he faced. And yet, to remain here would be to abandon your responsibilities. The stability of Rome affects all of us, including Egypt. You are the leader they need now. Caesar sighed, running a hand through his hair, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. If only I could bring you both with me. To have you by my side in Rome would strengthen my resolve. Cleopatra smiled, her heart swelling with love and pride. One day, our worlds will merge. For now, you must focus on securing the future of the Republic. I will hold the fort here, ensuring that Egypt remains stable and prosperous until you return. As she spoke, a sense of determination washed over her. Cleopatra had always been a woman of action, and now was no different. She could not let her feelings for Caesar cloud her judgment. The fate of her kingdom, and their son, depended on their ability to navigate this separation with strength and resolve. Promise me you will be careful, she urged, taking his hands in hers. The political climate in Rome is treacherous. There are those who would seek to undermine you, especially now that you have a son to protect. I promise, he replied, his voice fierce with conviction. And I will return as soon as I am able. You and Caesar Ion will always be my priority. Their moment was interrupted by a knock on the door, and the attendant entered with news of preparations for Caesar's departure. The time for goodbyes had arrived. Cleopatra stepped back, her heart aching at the thought of watching him leave. It is time, she said softly, fighting to keep her voice steady. You must go and fulfill your destiny. As they made their way to the grand hall where the troops awaited Caesar's command, Cleopatra felt a mix of pride and sorrow. The love they shared was powerful, but the realities of their roles weighed heavily on her heart. This was a time for strength, for the future of their kingdoms depended on it. The hall was filled with the sounds of soldiers preparing for their march. Caesar stood before them, his presence commanding respect and admiration. He surveyed the faces of his men, who looked to him with loyalty and determination. Brave soldiers of Rome, Caesar began, his voice echoing through the hall. I return to you to restore the Republic. Together, we shall face the challenges ahead and ensure the stability of our great nation. The glory of Rome must be preserved, and I will not rest until order is restored. The soldiers erupted into cheers, their spirits lifted by Caesar's words. Cleopatra watched from the side, her heart swelling with pride at the man who stood before them, a leader destined for greatness, yet tethered to her by love and ambition. As the celebration continued, Cleopatra stepped forward, capturing Caesar's attention once more. Remember, Julius, you carry our dreams with you, she said, her voice a soft whisper amid the clamor. You fight not just for Rome but for us, for the future we envision together. Caesar took a step closer, their eyes locking in a moment of shared understanding. I will not forget, Cleopatra. You and Caesar Ion are my heart. I carry you with me always. With one final kiss, filled with longing and promise, they sealed their commitment to each other, both as lovers and as partners in their respective realms. The moment felt eternal, a brief reprieve from the responsibilities that loomed ahead, but the call of duty beckoned, and with a heavy heart, Caesar turned to his men, ready to lead them into the unknown. As he stepped toward the entrance of the hall, Cleopatra felt the weight of their separation bearing down upon her. Be safe, Julius, she whispered, her voice barely audible as he disappeared from view. In that instant, a sense of determination flooded her heart. She would not allow herself to be consumed by fear or uncertainty. Cleopatra was a queen, and she would rise to the occasion, ruling Egypt with strength and wisdom while she awaited Caesar's return. As the sound of marching feet faded into the distance, Cleopatra turned back to the palace, a fierce resolve igniting within her. She would protect their legacy, nurture their son, and prepare for the challenges that lay ahead. The bond between her and Caesar was unbreakable, and together, they would face whatever storms awaited them on the horizon. The city of Rome thrummed with anticipation as news spread that Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, was on her way. The citizens buzzed with excitement, their imaginations captivated by tales of her beauty, intelligence, and the exotic splendor of her homeland. The Senate, too, was divided. Some members welcomed her with open arms, eager to forge stronger ties with Egypt, while others viewed her presence with skepticism, wary of the influence she would wield over Julius Caesar. As Cleopatra's ship sailed up the Tiber River, the grandeur of the moment unfolded before her. She stood at the prow, her regal bearing accentuated by a flowing gown of shimmering gold, adorned with intricate patterns that reflected the Egyptian sun. Her hair, dark and lustrous, was crowned with delicate jewels that sparkled like stars against the azure sky. The riverbanks were lined with curious spectators, their faces alight with wonder as they caught glimpses of the Queen. "Your Highness," Apollodorus said, his voice tinged with excitement, "we are nearing the city. The reception will be grand, and the people will be eager to see you." Cleopatra's heart raced with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had prepared for this moment, meticulously crafting her image and strategizing her entry into the political arena of Rome. But now that it was here, she felt the weight of expectations pressing down upon her. She had come to solidify her alliance with Caesar and ensure the stability of Egypt, but she knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. As the ship docked, a grand platform had been erected, adorned with flowers and golden garlands, waiting to welcome her. Cleopatra stepped down onto the gangplank, her heart pounding as she took her first steps onto Roman soil. The air buzzed with energy, the crowd cheering and clapping as they beheld the famed queen. Caesar stood at the forefront of the reception, his face lighting up at the sight of her. He was dressed in a toga of deep crimson, symbolizing his status as a triumphator, a conqueror. His eyes sparkled with admiration as he approached Cleopatra, pushing through the throng of onlookers who clamored to catch a glimpse of the pair. "Welcome to Rome, my queen," Caesar said, his voice warm and inviting. He took her hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture of both respect and affection. The crowd erupted into applause, their excitement palpable as they witnessed the bond between their leader and the enigmatic queen. Cleopatra smiled, a mix of relief and triumph washing over her. "Thank you, Julius. It is an honor to be here and to stand by your side." Together, they made their way through the throng, Cleopatra radiating confidence as she engaged with the citizens and dignitaries alike. She greeted them with grace, her smile enchanting those who approached. The lavishness of her attire and the air of mystery that surrounded her only heightened their intrigue. As they entered the forum, the heart of Roman political life, Cleopatra took in her surroundings. Marble columns towered above, and the grandeur of the architecture left her momentarily speechless. This was a world vastly different from her own, but she was determined to navigate it with poise and cunning. "Here we will address the Senate," Caesar said, guiding her to a raised platform. "It is essential that they see our unity, our strength." Cleopatra nodded, her heart racing as she prepared to speak before the assembled senators. She had rehearsed her words, carefully crafting a message that would convey both her commitment to the alliance and her own aspirations for Egypt, Romans. Caesar called, his voice booming across the gathering. "Today, we welcome a queen of unparalleled beauty and intelligence, Cleopatra of Egypt. Together, we shall forge a new path for our nations, united in purpose and ambition." The crowd cheered again, their voices echoing through the forum. Cleopatra stepped forward, feeling the weight of their gazes upon her. She took a deep breath, her heart steadying as she recalled the vision she held for her people. "Honorable senators, citizens of Rome," Cleopatra began, her voice clear and melodic. "I stand before you not just as the Queen of Egypt, but as a partner to Julius Caesar and a fellow ruler committed to the prosperity of our lands. Together, we shall create an alliance that honors our rich histories and propels us into a future of shared strength and success." The audience listened intently, captivated by her eloquence. Cleopatra's words were laced with purpose, and her charisma ignited a spark of interest among the senators. She understood that their approval was crucial, and she spoke passionately of collaboration, mutual respect. As she concluded her speech, the applause erupted, a wave of approval washing over her. Cleopatra felt a surge of confidence. She had made her mark in this unfamiliar land, and the prospect of the alliance with Caesar was now more tangible than ever. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed into smaller gatherings, eager to discuss the new queen and her potential influence. Cleopatra found herself surrounded by senators and dignitaries, each vying for her attention, eager to learn more about the woman who had captivated their leader. Caesar watched from a distance, a proud smile gracing his lips. He knew that Cleopatra was not just a beautiful queen, she was a formidable force in her own right. Together, they would navigate the political landscape, a partnership that would strengthen both Rome and Egypt. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the city, Cleopatra felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was not merely an honored guest, she was a queen ready to wield her influence and build a future for her son, for herself, and for the bond she shared with Caesar. And as she mingled with the influential figures of Rome, she knew that the true test of her strength was just beginning. Cleopatra was determined to leave an indelible mark on this city, proving that she was more than just a visitor, she was a queen destined for greatness. The Senate chamber was dimly lit, the flickering oil lamps casting long shadows across the marble floor. Senators gathered in hushed tones, their expressions a mix of anxiety and determination. The air was thick with tension, a palpable fear that grew with each passing day as Julius Caesar's power expanded. Whispers of dissent circulated among the senators, the specter of conspiracy looming over the republic like a dark cloud. Cassius, a lean man with sharp features and a reputation for cunning, stood at the center of the gathering. "He grows too powerful," he began, his voice low but urgent. "Caesar believes himself above the law, and with Cleopatra at his side, he threatens to reshape Rome into a monarchy. Brutus, known for his noble lineage and integrity, leaned against the stone pillar, conflicted. He has done much for the Republic, Cassius. He has brought stability and prosperity during tumultuous times. We cannot forget the goodwill he has earned. Goodwill? Cassius scoffed, his voice rising with fervor. What goodwill is worth when he intends to crown himself king? He flaunts his relationship with that foreign queen, and we sit idly by while he strips the Senate of its power. The other senators murmured in agreement, their faces etched with worry. The fear of losing their influence had transformed into resentment, and the seeds of conspiracy began to take root. Then what do you propose? Brutus asked, his brow furrowing. We cannot act in haste. There must be a better way to address this. Address it? How can we address a tyrant? Cassius shot back, his eyes burning with intensity. We must act before it's too late. The people may adore him now, but they are fickle. They will turn against him if we show them the truth. Another senator, Casca, a man known for his strong convictions, joined in. I have seen the way Caesar speaks to the masses, how he sways them with his charm. We cannot allow one man to take control of our destiny. We are Rome, and we must fight for our republic. The tension in the room escalated as senators exchanged glances, each weighing the risks of action against their desire to maintain their power. The thought of Caesar's growing influence sparked fear in their hearts, and the prospect of a united front against him began to take shape. Cassius stepped forward, addressing the group with passion. We must form a coalition. We have the power to turn the people against him, to show them that he is a threat to their freedoms. We will be the protectors of the Republic, and we will not stand by as he becomes a despot. The senators nodded in agreement, their spirits ignited by the prospect of rebellion. Plans began to unfold, whispers turning into murmurs of conspiracy. They knew they had to act swiftly, for Caesar's return from Alexandria was imminent, and with him came Cleopatra, the queen who could bolster his power. Let us gather those who share our concerns, Brutus suggested reluctantly, though the fire of dissent was igniting within him as well. We must ensure that we are not alone in this. We need allies among the populace and within the Senate. Cassius grinned, a sense of triumph washing over him. Yes, we will rally our supporters. If we can sow the seeds of doubt in the hearts of the citizens, we can undermine Caesar's authority and his vision of a united Rome. As they plotted in the shadows, the senators knew the risks they faced. The assassination of Julius Caesar would send shockwaves through the Republic, but they believed it was a necessary sacrifice to preserve their way of life. Days turned into nights, and whispers of the conspiracy spread through the Senate like wildfire. Some senators remained skeptical, wary of the consequences that could arise from such drastic actions, but the majority felt emboldened by their fear of Caesar's rising power. They saw him as a threat to their very existence. Meanwhile, Caesar prepared for his return, buoyed by the joy of his time in Alexandria and the birth of his son. He had every intention of continuing his work to unite Rome and Egypt, unaware of the storm brewing within the Senate. As the day of his arrival approached, the conspirators hastened their plans. Meetings were held in secret, alliances forged, and a date was set for the final act. Each senator committed to the cause, convinced that they were the true guardians of the Republic. On the eve of Caesar's return, the conspirators gathered one last time in the dimly lit Senate chamber. Their faces were grim, but there was a sense of determination that filled the room. "Tomorrow, we will take back our republic," Cassius declared, his voice steady. "We will rid Rome of this tyrant once and for all." Brutus, though filled with doubt, nodded. "For the good of Rome, we must see this through." As they sealed their pact, a dark cloud hung over them, a foreshadowing of the chaos that was about to unfold. The conspirators believed they were fighting for the Republic, but they were also setting in motion a series of events that would change the course of history forever. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a deep orange glow over the city of Rome. The weight of their decision hung in the air, the echoes of their conspiracy reverberating through the annals of time. As night fell, the stakes were raised, and the fate of the Republic rested precariously in the balance. The day dawned over Rome, the skies painted with hues of red and gold, a foreboding omen that would go unnoticed by the bustling city. In the Senate, tension hung thick in the air as senators gathered, their expressions a mix of excitement and trepidation. They were ready to set their plan into motion, their hearts racing with the promise of change. Julius Caesar entered the Senate chamber, his demeanor regal, confidence radiating from him. He had returned to Rome triumphant, yet little did he know that his fate was sealed. As he approached the podium, the whispers of the conspirators echoed in his mind, but he dismissed them as the fleeting murmurs of dissent. "Romans," Caesar began, his voice commanding attention. "I return to you with a vision for our great republic, a vision of unity, strength, and prosperity. Together, we will forge a new era for Rome." Applause erupted, filling the chamber with admiration. The senators clapped, some genuinely supportive while others masked their intentions with polite applause. Among them stood Cassius and Brutus, their faces betraying the tumult of emotions they felt. Today was the day they had prepared for, but as they watched Caesar speak, the gravity of their actions weighed heavily on their conscience. "Is it not the wish of all Romans to live free?" Cassius whispered to Brutus, his eyes narrowing. "Freedom from tyranny, from the grip of one man?" "Yes," Brutus replied, his heart heavy. "But at what cost?" As Caesar continued his address, the conspirators exchanged glances, their resolve hardening. They knew that the moment had come. The stakes were high, and the shadows of betrayal enveloped them. Cassius took a deep breath, gesturing toward the other senators, signaling the time to act. Suddenly, the chamber erupted into chaos. Cassius and his allies sprang into action, surrounding Caesar with a sudden ferocity. "Traitor!" Cassius shouted, drawing his dagger. "You have betrayed the Republic, and now you will pay." Caesar, caught off guard, looked around in shock as the realization struck him. The very men he had trusted were turning against him. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the panic rising within him. "Your ambition knows no bounds." Brutus shouted, stepping forward. "You must die to save Rome." With a swift movement, Cassius lunged at Caesar, plunging the dagger into his side. Caesar gasped, a look of disbelief washing over his face as he staggered backward. The other conspirators followed suit, each delivering their fatal blow with a mix of fury and desperation. "Et tu, brute?" Caesar gasped, his voice barely a whisper as he fell to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The chamber fell silent, the weight of betrayal hanging heavy in the air. The senators stood in shock, their hearts pounding, as the once great leader lay lifeless before them. The reality of their actions began to sink in. The ideal of saving the Republic had morphed into a nightmare, and chaos erupted in the Senate chamber. Senators scrambled to flee, some celebrating their newfound freedom, while others realized the magnitude of what they had done. News of Caesar's assassination spread like wildfire through Rome. The city, once bustling with the promise of prosperity, fell into turmoil as the citizens learned of the tragedy. A sense of dread filled the air, and fear took root in the hearts of those who had once cheered for their leader. In the midst of the chaos, Cleopatra received word of the assassination. She stood in her lavish quarters, her heart racing as the implications of Caesar's death sank in. Panic surged through her, and she felt a chill run down her spine. The political landscape of Rome was now uncertain, and she knew that her position was precarious. Cleopatra quickly summoned Apollodorus, her trusted servant. "We must leave, now," she ordered, her voice steady despite the panic that gripped her heart. "I cannot stay here a moment longer. Rome will turn against us." Apollodorus nodded, his expression grave. "I will prepare the ship. We must act swiftly to ensure your safety." As they hurriedly gathered her belongings, Cleopatra's mind raced. The bond she had formed with Caesar had been strong, and now that bond lay shattered in the Senate chamber. She had come to Rome to solidify her alliance with him, to carve out a place for Egypt in the Roman world, but now she was fleeing for her life. Outside, chaos erupted as citizens took to the streets, the news of Caesar's death igniting a frenzy. Anger and confusion swirled around her, and Cleopatra felt the weight of uncertainty closing in. She could hear the distant shouts of the mob, the cries of betrayal ringing through the air. Quickly, Cleopatra urged Apollodorus, her heart pounding in her chest. "We must reach the ship before they discover we are here." With her heart racing, she stepped into the tumultuous streets of Rome, the atmosphere charged with energy. Citizens gathered, some mourning Caesar, while others whispered of vengeance. Cleopatra kept her head down, her heart racing as they made their way toward the Tiber. As they reached the docks, Cleopatra's breath caught in her throat. A crowd had gathered, and panic coursed through her veins. She could see the ships bobbing in the water, the tide swelling as if reflecting the tumult of emotions surging within her. "Apollodorus, hurry," she urged, glancing nervously at the gathering crowd. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and fear clawed at her insides. With the ship in sight, they rushed aboard, and Apollodorus called for the crew to prepare for departure. Cleopatra took one last glance at the city that had promised so much, now shrouded in uncertainty and chaos. As the ship set sail, Cleopatra felt a sense of loss wash over her. She had left behind the man who had captivated her, whose vision had intertwined with her own. Now, she was adrift, unsure of what awaited her in the days to come. As they navigated away from the turmoil of Rome, Cleopatra steeled herself for the challenges ahead. The bond with Caesar had forged a path, but with his death came new dangers and uncertainties. She was a queen in exile, yet determined to reclaim her power and protect her son. with the winds at her back and the open sea before her, Cleopatra vowed to emerge from the shadows of betrayal and navigate the storm that had engulfed her life. The future awaited her, and she would not be defeated. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the eastern Mediterranean as Mark Antony's ship approached the bustling port of Tarsus. He stood at the helm, a rugged figure clad in armor, his chiseled features marked by determination. Yet, beneath his stoic exterior, a sense of anticipation coursed through him. He was not merely visiting Tarsus, he was on a mission to meet Cleopatra, the enigmatic queen of Egypt. As the ship docked, Antony could hear the distant strains of music, the melodious notes wafting across the water, wrapping around him like a silken cloak. The sounds grew louder as he stepped onto the dock, a vivid tapestry of colors and scents overwhelming his senses. The air was perfumed with exotic spices and flowers, hinting at the luxurious welcome that awaited him. Cleopatra had spared no expense in her preparations. Antony walked toward the riverbank, where a magnificent barge floated gracefully, adorned with vibrant silks and gilded ornaments. The sight was mesmerizing. It was as if the essence of Egypt had come alive upon the water. As he approached, Cleopatra appeared on the deck, a vision of beauty and power. Dressed in a flowing gown that shimmered like the Nile at sunset, her presence radiated allure. Her hair cascaded in dark waves, adorned with jewels that sparkled in the light. She exuded confidence, her gaze fixed upon Antony with a mix of curiosity and intrigue. Mark Antony, she called, her voice a sultry melody that echoed across the waters. Welcome to Egypt, where the sun rises in glory and the Nile flows with promise. Antony felt his breath catch in his throat. He had heard tales of her beauty, but seeing her in person was an experience that transcended mere words. The queen's allure was magnetic, and he found himself drawn to her like a moth to a flame. "Your Majesty," he replied, bowing slightly in respect. "It is an honor to be here, amidst such splendor." With a gracious smile, Cleopatra extended her hand toward him. "Come aboard, and let us celebrate our alliance. I have prepared a feast in your honor." As Antony stepped onto the barge, he was enveloped in a world of decadence. The deck was adorned with cushions of rich fabrics, while golden vessels filled with wine and fruit glimmered in the sunlight. Servants scurried about, pouring wine and arranging platters of exotic delicacies. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and music, as if the very essence of Egypt had gathered to welcome him. Cleopatra guided him to a low table draped in luxurious fabrics. "We have much to discuss, but first, let us enjoy this moment," she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Tell me, what brings a man like you to my shores?" Antony smiled, his heart racing. "I have come to secure an alliance with Egypt, to strengthen our position against those who threaten Rome. But I must confess, it is you who holds my attention." Cleopatra laughed softly, her laughter like the gentle ripple of water. "Flattery will get you far, Mark Antony. But remember, I am not easily swayed. I am a queen with my own ambitions." "Ambitions," he echoed, leaning closer, captivated by her presence. "Ambitions I admire. You are not just a queen, you are a force to be reckoned with. Together, we can accomplish great things." As they feasted and exchanged banter, the chemistry between them ignited the air. Cleopatra's wit and charm danced with Antony's bravado and passion, creating a connection that transcended politics. They spoke of Rome, of battles fought and won, and of the vision they shared for the future. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the scene. Cleopatra leaned back against the cushions, her eyes never leaving Antony's. "You intrigue me, Mark Antony. You are a man of ambition, yet you are also driven by passion. What do you truly seek?" Antony paused, contemplating her question. "I seek to restore honor to Rome, to protect its legacy. But I also seek something more," he admitted, his gaze piercing into hers. "Something I cannot yet define." Cleopatra smiled knowingly, her fingers tracing the rim of her goblet. "Ah, the allure of the unknown. It is what drives us, is it not? The quest for power, love, and legacy. You are a man who can help me reclaim my throne and restore my family's honor." "You have my loyalty," Antony said, his voice steady. "I will stand by your side, as both ally and lover, if you will have me." The words hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken promise. Cleopatra's smile widened, her eyes glimmering with mischief and ambition. "Then let us toast to our alliance and to the possibilities that lie ahead." They raised their goblets, the wine shimmering like rubies in the fading light. "To Egypt and Rome," Antony declared, feeling the weight of destiny upon him. "To power and passion," Cleopatra added, her eyes locked onto his, igniting a flame that would burn brightly in the days to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, Antony felt an undeniable connection to Cleopatra. He knew he had entered a world filled with intrigue and ambition, and he was willing to embrace it. Together, they would navigate the tumultuous waters of politics and passion, and the future of both Rome and Egypt lay intertwined in their hands. As night enveloped Tarsus, the shimmering stars mirrored the growing bond between Antony and Cleopatra. The atmosphere aboard the Queen's barge was electric, the air thick with anticipation and ambition. Laughter echoed into the night, mingling with the sound of lapping water, creating a symphony of revelry that masked the underlying tension of their shared destiny. Cleopatra reclined gracefully against the plush cushions, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a silken waterfall. The flickering candlelight danced across her face, illuminating her striking features and the exquisite jewelry that adorned her neck and wrists. She exuded an air of power that was both intoxicating and intimidating, and Antony felt himself drawn to her magnetic presence. "Tell me, Mark Antony," she said, her voice a sultry whisper that sent a shiver down his spine. "What do you truly seek in this alliance? Is it only power, or is there something more?" Antony took a moment to consider her question, his gaze lingering on the beauty before him. "Power, yes. But more than that, I seek purpose," he replied, his voice steady. "In these tumultuous times, I want to forge an alliance that can reshape the future of Rome and Egypt. Together, we can create a legacy that will be remembered for generations." Cleopatra leaned closer, her eyes shimmering with intrigue. "And what legacy would that be? One ruled by the might of Rome, or one that embraces the richness of Egypt's culture?" I will not be merely a pawn in your game, Antony. I will be your equal. Antony smiled, captivated by her fierce spirit. I would never underestimate you, Cleopatra. You are as formidable as any Roman general. I want to merge our strengths, to create a power that neither Rome nor Egypt can ignore. Cleopatra regarded him thoughtfully, her fingers lightly grazing the rim of her goblet. Then let us not waste this moment, she proposed, her voice low and seductive. Let us solidify our bond, not just in politics, but in passion as well. With that, she reached out, her fingertips brushing against Antony's hand. A spark ignited between them, sending a jolt of electricity coursing through his veins. Their eyes locked, a silent understanding passing between them. The world outside faded away, and in that instant, it was only the two of them, two rulers bound by ambition and desire. Let us seal this alliance with a vow, Antony suggested, his heart racing as he leaned closer. One that goes beyond mere words. We can fight for each other, rule together, and, if you will allow it, love each other fiercely. Cleopatra's smile widened, a mixture of mischief and determination lighting up her eyes. Then let us make a pact, Antony. A pact of loyalty and love, one that will withstand the storms of our worlds. With that, Cleopatra raised her goblet, and Antony mirrored her gesture. To our fateful bond, he declared, his voice rich with conviction. They clinked their goblets together, the sound echoing through the night like a promise. As the evening progressed, they shared stories of their pasts, their aspirations, and their dreams. Antony spoke of his time in Rome, his military campaigns, and the weight of responsibility that bore down on him as a leader. Cleopatra shared tales of her own trials, her struggles against Ptolemy, and her ambitions to reclaim her throne. With each story, they peeled back the layers of their personas, revealing their vulnerabilities and aspirations. The passion between them swelled like the tide, each stolen glance and gentle touch igniting a flame that burned brightly in the depths of their hearts. As the stars twinkled above them, Cleopatra leaned in closer, her lips brushing against Antony's ear. I want to show you the true beauty of Egypt, its wonders and secrets. Our love will be as legendary as the stories of old. Antony's breath hitched, his pulse quickening at her words. Then show me, he urged, his voice low and fervent. Let me see the world through your eyes, Cleopatra. With a sultry smile, Cleopatra rose gracefully, beckoning him to follow her. She led him to the edge of the barge, where the moonlight bathed the water in a silvery glow. Look, Antony, she said, gesturing toward the horizon where the Nile met the sky. This river has witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the love stories of countless souls. Together, we will become part of that legacy. Antony gazed at the Nile, its waters flowing smoothly, whispering secrets of the past. He turned to Cleopatra, her silhouette framed against the moonlit backdrop. Together, we will create a legacy that will echo through time, he vowed, feeling the weight of his words. Cleopatra stepped closer, her eyes ablaze with determination. We will face our enemies and emerge victorious, for we are stronger together than apart. Our love will be a force that cannot be reckoned with. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, igniting a fire that consumed them both. The world around them faded away, leaving only the two of them entwined in their fateful bond. The kiss deepened, fueled by their shared ambition and desire, as if sealing the pact they had just made. In that moment, they were no longer just a Roman general and an Egyptian queen, they were a united front, ready to conquer whatever challenges lay ahead. The night enveloped them, a tapestry of stars witnessing the birth of a powerful alliance, one that would shape the course of history. As they pulled away, breathless, Antony's heart swelled with hope and passion. "We will not just survive, we will thrive," he promised, his gaze steady upon her. Cleopatra nodded, her eyes shining with ambition. "Then let our journey begin, Mark Antony. Together, we will leave our mark upon the world." And as the barge floated gently on the Nile, the currents of fate began to shift. The fateful bond between Antony and Cleopatra was forged, setting the stage for a tumultuous and passionate alliance that would change the course of history forever. Back in Rome, the air was thick with tension as news of Mark Antony's alliance with Cleopatra spread like wildfire. Whispers and murmurs rippled through the Senate, igniting a firestorm of concern among the Roman elite. The once unified leadership found itself splintering under the weight of uncertainty and fear. In the Grand Senate chamber, the marble columns loomed ominously as senators gathered for an emergency meeting. Their faces, marked with concern and suspicion, reflected the growing unease that had taken hold of the Republic. Among them was Cassius, a seasoned senator known for his sharp wit and political acumen. He stood to address the assembly, his voice rising above the murmurs. "Mark Antony, our esteemed general, has gone to Egypt, abandoning his duties to indulge in the company of a foreign queen," Cassius declared, his tone laced with disdain. "We cannot ignore the implications of this relationship. Cleopatra is not just a ruler, she is a woman who has manipulated men before. We must question Antony's loyalty to Rome." The room erupted into a chorus of agreement, with senators nodding vigorously and exchanging worried glances. Among them sat Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, whose youthful face bore the weight of his responsibility. He listened intently, his mind racing with calculations and strategies. The alliance between Antony and Cleopatra could shift the balance of power, threatening his own ambitions and the stability of Rome. "We must act swiftly," Octavian interjected, his voice steady and authoritative. "If Antony is swayed by Cleopatra's charms, we risk losing not only his allegiance but also the loyalty of his legions. The people of Rome expect us to protect their interests." Senator Brutus, a close friend of both Caesar and Octavian, raised a hand, seeking to quell the rising tide of fear. "Let us not act out of panic, my friends. Antony is a man of honor and strength. He has always served Rome well. This alliance may serve to strengthen our position against our enemies." "Honor?" Cassius scoffed, leaning forward. "What honor is there in abandoning our republic for the whims of a foreign seductress? While he cavorts in luxury, we are left vulnerable to those who would seek to undermine us." The debate intensified, voices rising in fervor as senators passionately defended their positions. The tension in the chamber grew palpable, the weight of impending decisions looming overhead. Octavian surveyed the room, recognizing the power struggle unfolding before him. This was not just a matter of Antony's loyalty, it was about control of Rome itself. Enough. Octavian finally called, his voice cutting through the chaos. The senators fell silent, turning their attention to him. We must consider the strategic implications of this alliance. If Antony believes he can secure Egypt's support against our adversaries, we must either align with him or find a way to undermine his position. Cassius nodded, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps we should send an envoy to Antony, to remind him of his responsibilities to Rome. We can offer him an alternative, a path that does not involve the Queen of Egypt. And what would that be? Brutus questioned, skepticism in his tone. To sow discord between two powerful leaders. That would be a dangerous game. Better a game than a tragedy, Cassius replied sharply. If we allow this alliance to solidify, we risk losing Antony to Cleopatra's influence. We must protect our republic at all costs. Octavian considered their words carefully, his mind racing with the possibilities. Very well, he said slowly. I will write to Antony. I will remind him of his duty and the expectations of Rome. We must tread carefully, for we cannot afford to alienate our most formidable general. As the meeting adjourned, Octavian felt the weight of their discussions press heavily on his shoulders. The growing rift between Antony and the Senate threatened not only his position but also the stability of the Republic. He understood that the political landscape was shifting, and if he was to maintain control, he would need to play a careful hand. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, Antony was blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing back home. He remained wrapped in the embrace of Cleopatra, intoxicated by her presence and the possibilities that lay ahead. Yet, the shadow of Rome loomed large, a reminder that alliances forged in passion could easily fracture under the weight of ambition. As Antony continued to indulge in the pleasures of Egypt, the seeds of doubt were being sown in Rome. Tension simmered beneath the surface, and the balance of power was teetering on the brink of chaos. The fateful bond between Antony and Cleopatra would soon be tested by the very forces that sought to tear them apart. The air in Rome was thick with anticipation as news of Mark Antony's unexpected marriage reached the Senate. The political landscape had shifted once again, and this time, it was a marriage that would solidify alliances and further complicate the already intricate web of power. Octavian's sister, Octavia, was to become Antony's wife, a union that held both promise and peril. In the opulent halls of the Senate, senators gathered to discuss the implications of this marriage. The mood was a blend of curiosity and skepticism. At the head of the chamber stood Octavian, his youthful face betraying no emotion, yet internally grappling with the complexities of his family ties. He was both relieved and wary of this union, knowing it could strengthen Antony's position while simultaneously drawing the lines between loyalty and betrayal. Mark Antony's marriage to Octavia is a strategic move, Octavian addressed the assembly, his voice steady. It aligns him with the Julian bloodline, reinforcing his commitment to Rome and countering any lingering doubts about his loyalty. Cassius, ever skeptical, stood to voice his concerns. And what of Cleopatra? Will she allow this marriage to occur without protest? The Queen of Egypt will not take kindly to being cast aside, even if it is for the sake of politics. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Senators exchanged glances, aware of the complexities that lay ahead. Antony's relationship with Cleopatra had captivated Rome's imagination, and now, the impending marriage threatened to ignite a powder keg of emotions and ambitions. "We cannot afford to appear weak," Octavian continued, his tone firm. "Antony must present a united front to both the people of Rome and our enemies. This marriage will ensure that our interests remain protected and that the threat from Cleopatra is kept at bay." As the discussions continued, a sense of inevitability settled over the assembly. While the marriage was politically advantageous, it also served as a reminder of the delicate balance between personal desires and public duty. Antony was a man torn between two powerful women, and the consequences of his choices would reverberate throughout Rome and Egypt alike. Meanwhile, in the lavish gardens of Cleopatra's palace in Alexandria, the queen paced anxiously. The news of Antony's marriage to Octavia had reached her ears, igniting a tempest of emotions within her. She felt a deep sense of betrayal, her heart heavy with the knowledge that Antony had chosen duty over love. "Apollodorus," she called, her voice laced with urgency. The loyal servant appeared at her side, concern etched across his face. "We must prepare for the repercussions of Antony's marriage. He cannot abandon what we have built together, not when our alliance is so vital. Your Majesty, he seeks to consolidate power in Rome," Apollodorus replied gently, aware of the storm brewing within her. "This marriage may be a means to an end, a way to appease Octavian and stabilize his position." "Stabilize?" Cleopatra scoffed, her voice rising. "He stabilizes at the expense of our union. I will not be sidelined, Apollodorus. I refuse to be reduced to a mere footnote in the story of his ambition." Her fierce determination resonated through the air, a reminder that Cleopatra was not a woman to be trifled with. She had fought for her throne, and she would not allow Antony's marriage to Octavia to overshadow their bond. "We will show Rome that our alliance is stronger than any marriage he enters into," she declared, a glimmer of resolve shining in her eyes. "We will remind him of what he has sacrificed." As the preparations for the wedding unfolded in Rome, Antony found himself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. He stood in the opulent chamber adorned with flowers and silk, preparing for his marriage to Octavia. The weight of expectation bore down on him, and the reality of his choice began to settle in. Octavia entered, her serene beauty contrasting sharply with the turmoil in his heart. She was a woman of grace and loyalty, yet Antony couldn't shake the feeling that he was betraying the passion he had found with Cleopatra. He took her hand, offering a smile, but the warmth didn't reach his eyes. "Octavia," he began, his voice tinged with uncertainty, "this union is meant to strengthen our cause. Together, we can protect Rome from threats, both external and internal." Octavia's gaze held steady, her understanding deep. "I know why we are marrying, Antony. But let us not forget that bonds forged in duty can also lead to genuine affection. I will support you, no matter the circumstances." "Your support means everything to me," he replied, though a part of him longed for the fiery passion he had shared with Cleopatra. The weight of his decision felt heavier than the gilded garments he wore. As the ceremony commenced, the hall was filled with senators, dignitaries, and the common people of Rome. Antony and Octavia exchanged vows, their words echoing through the grand chamber. Yet, in the back of Antony's mind, a sense of foreboding loomed. What price would he pay for this marriage of convenience? Would it truly serve to protect his interests, or would it fracture the delicate balance he had struck with Cleopatra? The ceremony concluded with cheers and applause, yet the air was thick with unspoken tensions. As Antony stood alongside his new bride, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into a storm, one that would test the bonds of loyalty, love, and ambition in ways he could not yet comprehend. Meanwhile, Cleopatra watched from afar, her heart heavy with a sense of loss and resolve. The marriage was a declaration of war on their love, and she was determined to fight for her place in Antony's heart and the destiny they had envisioned together. The game of power had shifted, and she would not let it end without a fight. The Nile flowed relentlessly beneath the pale moonlight, its currents whispering secrets of betrayal and ambition. Cleopatra stood on the balcony of her palace, the cool breeze ruffling her hair, but it could not quell the storm brewing within her heart. News of Antony's marriage to Octavia had cut deep, igniting a fury that surged through her veins like the mighty river below. "Your Majesty," Apollodorus said softly, stepping out onto the balcony to join her. The concern etched on his face mirrored her own turmoil. "We must think strategically about how to respond to Antony's marriage. This could be an opportunity." "An opportunity?" Cleopatra scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "To allow him to cast me aside? To become a pawn in his political games? I will not be discarded, Apollodorus. I refuse to play the role of the scorned lover while he aligns himself with my enemy." Her voice rose with passion, echoing into the night. The servant remained silent, knowing better than to provoke the queen further. The Nile, vast and powerful, symbolized her own strength, and Cleopatra was determined to harness that energy to reclaim what was rightfully hers. "Antony must remember the bond we share," she continued, her mind racing with possibilities. "I will remind him of the passion we ignited, the power of our alliance. He has forgotten that the true strength lies not just in political unions but in the fire of desire." Apollodorus nodded, sensing her determination. "What do you propose, Your Majesty?" Cleopatra turned to face him, her eyes ablaze with ambition. "We will throw a grand feast, an event that will showcase the wealth and magnificence of Egypt. I will invite Antony to attend, to remind him of the life he left behind and the promise of what could still be. The feast will attract attention," Apollodorus cautioned. "But it may also draw the ire of Octavian and the senators. They will see it as a challenge, a provocation." Cleopatra waved a hand dismissively. "Let them see it as they will. If Antony attends, he will remember the allure of Egypt, the culture, the beauty, and above all, me. This marriage may strengthen his position, but I will show him that love cannot be replaced by duty." As she spoke, the waters of the Nile surged, reflecting her fierce spirit. Cleopatra could feel the pulse of the river resonating with her own ambitions, a reminder of the power she wielded as the Queen of Egypt. "We will make the feast an event to remember," she declared, her voice steady. "It will be a celebration of our bond and a testament to the riches of my kingdom." Days passed as Cleopatra meticulously planned the feast, gathering the finest entertainers, chefs, and artisans to create an experience that would dazzle even the most jaded Roman. Colorful banners adorned the palace, while the scent of exotic spices filled the air, mingling with the sweet notes of jasmine and myrrh. The celebration was designed to overwhelm the senses and reignite the flame that once burned brightly between her and Antony. On the evening of the feast, the palace shimmered like a jewel under the night sky. The dining hall was adorned with gold and silver, the flickering candles casting a warm glow over the elegantly set tables. Musicians played haunting melodies that danced through the air, inviting laughter and revelry. Cleopatra watched from her throne, her heart racing with anticipation. As guests began to arrive, Cleopatra greeted them with a radiant smile, her confidence unshaken. She maintained her poise, but inside, she felt the tension mounting. Would Antony come? Would he remember the passion that had bound them together? Or would he choose the safe haven of Octavia's embrace? When Antony finally entered, the room fell silent, the atmosphere charged with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. He looked every bit the Roman general, exuding strength and authority. But when his gaze landed on Cleopatra, the world around them faded into a blur. The longing and heat of their shared past ignited within him. Cleopatra, he greeted, his voice low and laced with emotion. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the pull between duty and desire. Mark Antony, she replied, her voice sultry and inviting. Welcome to Egypt, where the Nile flows freely, and the heart knows no boundaries. Antony stepped closer, his expression betraying a flicker of vulnerability. This is quite the spectacle, Your Majesty. I did not expect such grandeur. Cleopatra leaned forward slightly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I wish to remind you of what you have left behind. The beauty of Egypt is matched only by the beauty of our bond. Tonight, let us indulge in the pleasures of life. As the feast progressed, Cleopatra orchestrated the evening with precision, ensuring that every detail served to rekindle the fire between them. The food was exquisite, the wine flowed generously, and the entertainment was mesmerizing. Dancers moved gracefully across the floor, their bodies swaying to the rhythm of the music, captivating everyone in attendance. Antony watched, entranced, yet a part of him remained tethered to his duty back in Rome. He felt torn between two worlds, one that offered him power and respect, and another that promised passion and freedom. Do you remember our nights beneath the stars? Cleopatra asked, her voice softening as she caught his gaze. The promises we made to each other. You said we would conquer the world together. Antony's heart ached at the memory. I do remember, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But I have obligations, Cleopatra. My marriage to Octavia is meant to strengthen our position in Rome. Obligations can be a burden, my dear Antony, she countered, leaning closer, her breath brushing against his skin. Remember the fire we ignited together. Our ambitions do not have to be mutually exclusive. You can be both a Roman general and the lover of an Egyptian queen. Her words hung in the air like a spell, weaving a tapestry of temptation and longing. Antony felt the pull of their connection, the weight of the past colliding with the present. The fury of the Nile raged outside, a perfect reflection of the tumult within his soul. As the night wore on, Cleopatra's laughter echoed through the palace, mingling with the sounds of merriment. She was determined to capture Antony's heart once more, to remind him of the fierce bond they shared and the power they could wield together. As the moon hung high in the sky, bathing the world in silver light, Cleopatra leaned closer, her eyes locked onto Antony's. "Join me, Mark Antony. Let us reign together, not as distant leaders but as partners, united in ambition and love." The tension between them crackled like the energy in the air. Antony felt the storm within him clash with the loyalty he owed to Octavia and Rome. He was at a crossroads, and the path he chose would alter the course of his life forever. The sun rose over Rome, casting golden rays upon the bustling city. Yet, in the heart of the Senate, shadows loomed large. Whispers of discontent echoed through the marble halls as senators speculated about Mark Antony's allegiance. Just days after his marriage to Octavia, rumors swirled like the summer winds. Would he remain faithful to his wife, or would he abandon her for the allure of Cleopatra? In a secluded corner of the Senate chamber, Antony sat, his brow furrowed in thought. The tension within him had reached a boiling point, fueled by the lavish feast he had attended in Egypt. The vivid memories of Cleopatra's laughter, her intoxicating presence, and the passion they shared flooded his mind, clouding his judgment and filling his heart with longing. "Antony." Octavian's voice cut through the silence, jolting him from his reverie. "We cannot ignore the political ramifications of your actions. Your marriage to Octavia was meant to solidify our strength against the forces that threaten Rome. You cannot simply abandon your responsibilities for a fleeting desire." Antony turned to face his old friend, his jaw clenched. "And what of my desires, Octavian? What of the fire that burns within me? I married Octavia out of duty, but my heart belongs to Cleopatra." Octavian's expression hardened. "You must be careful. Cleopatra is not merely a lover, she is a queen with ambitions of her own. You risk not only your political future but the stability of Rome itself." Antony stood, a determined glint in his eye. "If loyalty to Cleopatra means risking my position, then so be it. I cannot deny what she represents for me: love, power, and the possibility of greatness." Octavian sighed, frustration etched on his face. "You're playing a dangerous game, Antony. Your enemies are watching. The Senate will not stand idly by while you abandon your duties for the whims of an Egyptian queen." Antony's resolve only hardened. He had lived long enough under the weight of expectation, stifled by the ambitions of others. The thought of Cleopatra's passionate embrace was a siren's call he could no longer resist. With a final nod to Octavian, he strode out of the chamber, leaving his friend to ponder the consequences of his choices. As he made his way through the crowded streets of Rome, Antony's heart raced. He felt an overwhelming sense of urgency driving him to the harbor. He would leave this place behind, this facade of duty and obligation, and return to the woman who held his heart captive. The closer he got to the docks, the more resolute he became. The ship that would take him back to Egypt awaited him, its sails billowing in the wind, eager to carry him away from the constraints of Rome. He boarded, and as the vessel set sail, a sense of liberation washed over him. The cool sea breeze brushed against his face, and he closed his eyes, envisioning Cleopatra standing at the shore to greet him. Days passed, and as they sailed the Mediterranean, memories of their time together played like a vivid tapestry in his mind. The softness of her skin, the thrill of their late-night conversations, the way she challenged him while igniting a fire deep within. Each memory fueled his determination to reclaim the bond they had forged. When the shores of Alexandria finally came into view, a rush of excitement surged through him. The city, with its bustling markets and vibrant culture, felt alive as he disembarked. The air was thick with the scent of spices and the sounds of merchants calling out their wares, but all he could think about was Cleopatra. "Your Majesty," he breathed as he approached the palace, anticipation thrumming in his veins. Cleopatra awaited him in the grand hall, radiant and regal, dressed in flowing silks that accentuated her every curve. The moment their eyes met, a spark ignited between them, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had never truly broken. "Antony," she breathed, her voice a melody that wrapped around him. "You've returned." "I have abandoned Rome and Octavia," he declared, his voice steady and resolute. "I am yours, Cleopatra. My loyalty lies with you and the dreams we once shared." Her expression shifted from surprise to joy, and in an instant, she crossed the distance between them, wrapping her arms around him. He held her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of jasmine and myrrh that lingered on her skin. The world around them faded, leaving only the two of them bound by a shared desire for power, love, and ambition. "Together, we will reclaim what is ours," Cleopatra whispered, pulling back slightly to gaze into his eyes. "You and I can forge a new path, one that will send ripples throughout Rome and beyond." Antony smiled, feeling the weight of his decisions lift. "Yes, together. We will remind them that passion and loyalty can exist in tandem with power. I will not let you fight this battle alone." As they stood together, the fury of the Nile surged just beyond the palace walls, a fitting reflection of their ambitions. Antony and Cleopatra were poised to rewrite history, to become legends in their own right, united against a world that sought to divide them. They shared a kiss, sealing their vow in a moment of intense longing. In that instant, the past faded away, and all that mattered was the promise of their future, a future where their love would conquer all. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over Alexandria as the day of Antony and Cleopatra's public marriage dawned. The city buzzed with excitement, the streets adorned with colorful banners and flowers, a testament to the opulence of the event. It was to be a celebration like no other, one that would intertwine their fates in the eyes of the world and challenge the very foundations of Roman authority. As Antony prepared for the ceremony in his chambers, he felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety coursing through him. "This is a momentous occasion," he murmured to himself, adjusting his attire, lavish robes embroidered with golden thread, signifying his dual allegiance to Rome and Egypt. A soft knock on the door drew his attention, and Apollodorus entered, his expression a blend of pride and concern. "General, the guests are gathering in the grand hall. Cleopatra is ready, and the people await the ceremony." Antony nodded, a determined glint in his eye. "Let them see. Let the Romans see that we are united, that we will not hide in the shadows. Just be mindful of the implications," Apollodorus warned gently. "Octavian will not take this lightly, and the Senate may react with hostility. Antony waved off the concerns. Let them come. We will not cower before their threats. This is our moment. With that, he strode confidently out of the chamber, following Apollodorus through the ornate corridors of the palace. The grand hall was a spectacle of grandeur. Elaborate decorations adorned every surface, with lush drapes in royal hues framing the entrance. The atmosphere crackled with energy as nobles, dignitaries, and citizens gathered, all eager to witness the union of the powerful Roman general and the enchanting Queen of Egypt. Cleopatra stood at the altar, radiant and regal, adorned in a gown of shimmering gold that accentuated her beauty. Her dark hair was intricately braided, embellished with jewels that sparkled in the sunlight streaming through the high windows. As she saw Antony approach, her heart raced, filled with love and determination. Antony, she greeted him, her voice soft yet powerful. Today, we will declare our love to the world and claim our destiny. He took her hands in his, feeling the warmth of her touch. Together, we will show them that our bond is unbreakable. As the ceremony commenced, the air was thick with anticipation. The high priest chanted sacred verses, invoking the blessings of the gods. Antony and Cleopatra exchanged vows, their words echoing through the hall, resonating with promises of loyalty, love, and shared ambition. I take you, Cleopatra, as my queen and my partner, in love and in power, Antony declared, his voice steady, reverberating with conviction. And I take you, Mark Antony, as my beloved and my ally, united in heart and ambition. Cleopatra replied, her gaze unwavering. With the final pronouncement of their union, the crowd erupted into applause, a chorus of cheers and joyous shouts. Cleopatra and Antony turned to face the assembled guests, their hands clasped together, a powerful symbol of their alliance. The joy of the moment enveloped them, but lurking beneath the surface was the tension of what lay ahead. The celebrations carried on into the night, with feasting and dancing filling the grand hall. Laughter and music echoed as revelers indulged in the finest Egyptian delicacies and wines. Cleopatra and Antony moved among their guests, embracing the joyous atmosphere, yet a subtle unease lingered in the air. As they raised their goblets in a toast, Cleopatra caught the eye of a senator among the crowd, one who wore a scowl of disapproval. The shadows of Roman politics loomed large, and she knew this union would not go unnoticed. Let us enjoy this moment, Antony whispered, sensing her tension. They can grumble all they want, we are stronger together. Cleopatra nodded, her resolve solidifying. But we must be prepared for their backlash. Octavian will not forgive this slight. As the night wore on, the celebrations reached a fever pitch, but Cleopatra's thoughts drifted toward the impending storm. Would the bond they had forged withstand the wrath of Rome? News of the marriage spread like wildfire across the Roman Empire. Senators and citizens alike reacted with outrage and disbelief. How dare he, they exclaimed, their voices rising in indignation. Antony has betrayed his duty to Rome for an Egyptian queen. In the Senate, Octavian seethed with fury, his features dark and stormy. This is a declaration of war. He has shamed our family, aligned himself with a foreign power, and risked everything we've fought for. Senators murmured among themselves, some voicing support for Octavian's stance, while others debated the implications of Antony's actions. "If we do not act swiftly, we will lose our influence," one senator warned, his voice sharp. "Antony must be brought to heel, or we risk losing all that we hold dear." Back in Alexandria, Cleopatra and Antony continued their celebration, unaware of the turmoil brewing in Rome. They danced and laughed, basking in the thrill of their newfound power, unaware that their union was igniting a firestorm that would change the course of their lives forever. As the festivities drew to a close, Cleopatra turned to Antony, her eyes shining with passion and ambition. "Together, we will reshape the future," she vowed, her voice unwavering. Antony smiled, pulling her closer. "Let them come. We will face whatever storms arise together. This is only the beginning of our reign." As they stood together, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air, a blend of love, ambition, and the promise of an uncertain future. Together, they would face the world, determined to carve their names into history, regardless of the cost. The atmosphere in Rome was electric with tension as whispers of Antony and Cleopatra's marriage spread through the streets like wildfire. In the Senate, Octavian stood at the center of the storm, the weight of indignation resting heavily on his shoulders. His blue eyes, usually calm and calculating, burned with determination as he addressed the assembled senators. "Fellow Romans," he began, his voice steady yet fierce, "we stand at a crossroads. Mark Antony, once a revered general and ally, has chosen to abandon our republic for the charms of an Egyptian queen. His marriage to Cleopatra is not just a betrayal, it is a declaration of war against us." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, the senators exchanging furtive glances. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged looks of skepticism, uncertain about how far Octavian would go to reclaim his honor. "Antony has openly aligned himself with a foreign power, placing our very sovereignty at risk," Octavian continued, his voice rising. "If we allow this union to stand unchallenged, we will invite chaos into our beloved Rome. We cannot stand idly by while he flaunts his disloyalty." His words ignited a fire within the hearts of the senators, and the room erupted with fervent applause. They had long harbored resentment toward Antony, viewing him as a reckless soldier with ambitions that threatened the republic. "Let us rally our forces. Let us prepare for war," one senator shouted, his voice piercing through the clamor. Octavian raised his hand, urging silence. "I will lead the charge against Antony and Cleopatra. We must send a clear message that Rome does not tolerate treachery. We will reclaim our dignity and restore order to our republic." The Senate erupted once more, their shouts echoing through the marble halls. "To war," they chanted, their voices a chorus of unity fueled by Octavian's fiery rhetoric. Meanwhile, in Alexandria, Cleopatra and Antony reveled in their love, oblivious to the tempest brewing in Rome. They had hosted a lavish banquet that evening, filled with laughter, music, and extravagant displays of wealth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the festivities, Cleopatra leaned closer to Antony, her eyes sparkling. "Tonight, we celebrate our union and the strength it brings," she declared, raising her goblet. "May we conquer all that stands in our way." Antony grinned, his heart swelling with pride. "Together, we are unstoppable. We will rewrite history." But the joyous atmosphere was suddenly pierced by the arrival of Apollodorus, breathless and wide-eyed. "Your Majesties! News from Rome. Octavian has declared war." The revelry ceased as shock settled over the room. Cleopatra's smile faded, and Antony's expression turned grave. "He dares to challenge us." Antony growled, his hands clenching into fists. "Octavian believes he can rally the Senate and the people against us," Apollodorus explained, his voice urgent. "He has taken your marriage as a direct affront, and they are gathering forces to march on Egypt." Cleopatra stood, her demeanor shifting from joy to resolve. "Then we shall not be passive. We will prepare for battle and show them the strength of our alliance." Antony nodded, the fire of ambition igniting within him. "Let Octavian come. We will meet him on the battlefield, and we will not falter. We have the resources of Egypt at our disposal, and together, we will forge an army that will make Rome tremble." Back in Rome, Octavian had emerged as a force of determination. He rallied supporters, painting a vivid picture of a united Rome standing against foreign threats. He called upon the legions, urging them to join his cause, promising glory and honor in the battle against Antony's treachery. "Antony seeks to turn our republic into a puppet of Cleopatra's desires," he proclaimed, standing before a massive crowd in the Forum. "We cannot allow a queen from a foreign land to dictate the future of Rome. We must fight for our republic and our way of life." The crowd responded with cheers, their voices echoing through the streets. The Senate had backed Octavian, and soon the tide of public opinion had shifted. Men from all walks of life answered the call to arms, eager to defend their homeland against perceived threats. With an army assembling under his command, Octavian felt the swell of confidence growing within him. He was no longer the young man overshadowed by Antony's charisma. He had become a formidable leader, one who would not shy away from conflict. As Octavian prepared for war, he plotted his strategy, determined to outmaneuver his rival. He knew that Antony was strong, but he also believed that Antony's ties to Cleopatra would be his undoing. "She is not one of us," he would remind his generals, "and that will be her downfall." In the coming days, Octavian's forces began to mobilize, and he dispatched messengers throughout the empire, rallying support for his cause. He painted Antony as a traitor and Cleopatra as a manipulative seductress, a narrative that resonated with the citizens of Rome. Back in Alexandria, as news of Octavian's preparations reached Cleopatra and Antony, they steeled themselves for the inevitable clash. "We will not allow them to dictate our future," Cleopatra vowed, her eyes fierce with determination. "We will rise against them, and our legacy will endure." Antony placed his hand on her shoulder, feeling the weight of their impending struggle. "Together, we will face whatever comes. We will not shy away from the challenge." As the sun set over the Nile, casting long shadows across the city, both sides prepared for war, aware that the battle ahead would shape the destinies of Antony, Cleopatra, and Rome itself. The stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through history, a clash of titans fueled by ambition, love, and the desire for power. The sun hung low over the Ionian Sea, casting a fierce glare upon the ships arrayed like soldiers preparing for battle. On the horizon, the waters shimmered, a deceptive calm masking the tension that brewed in the hearts of men. It was the summer of 31 BC, and the fate of empires hung in the balance at the Battle of Actium. Antony stood aboard his flagship, the Antonia, surveying his fleet as they readied themselves for the impending clash. The heavy scent of salt water mingled with the acrid smoke from burning braziers. He turned to his trusted commanders, their faces taut with anticipation. "Today, we fight not just for our lives but for our legacy," Antony declared, his voice booming over the shouts of men and the creaking of wood. "Octavian seeks to dismantle everything we have built. We will show him the strength of our resolve, the power of our alliance." His words ignited a fire in the hearts of his men, and they roared in agreement. But as Antony looked toward the horizon, he felt an uneasy knot tighten in his stomach. He was aware of the disparity between their fleets. Octavian's forces were more numerous, better supplied, and united under a single banner. Yet he clung to the hope that his bond with Cleopatra would be their salvation. Meanwhile, on Cleopatra's royal barge, the queen paced restlessly, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She had donned her most regal attire, a flowing gown that glimmered in the sun, yet the weight of impending doom settled heavily on her shoulders. "Apollodorus," she called, her voice sharp. The loyal servant rushed to her side. "What news of our forces? Will they hold against Octavian's might?" Apollodorus shook his head, concern etched across his features. "The reports are grim, Your Majesty. Octavian's fleet is massive, and their strategy is aggressive. They have the advantage of surprise." Cleopatra's eyes darkened with resolve. "Then we must not falter. If Antony loses today, we cannot allow ourselves to be captured. We must prepare to retreat." As the final preparations unfolded, Cleopatra's heart raced, knowing that the stakes were higher than ever. She cast her gaze upon Antony, standing tall upon his ship, and felt a surge of love and fear. "We are destined to win," she whispered to herself, praying for victory. The signal to commence battle rang out across the water, a blast from Octavian's flagship. The air filled with the clash of metal and the cries of men as ships surged forward, cutting through the waves in a frenzy of movement. Antony's fleet met Octavian's head-on, a cacophony of chaos and fury erupting as they engaged. Antony fought valiantly at the helm of the Antonia, commanding his crew with fierce resolve. He believed in the strength of his men and the righteousness of their cause. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that Octavian's forces were relentless. In the heat of battle, Octavian's warships maneuvered with precision, their ranks well coordinated, targeting the gaps in Antony's fleet. The sound of splintering wood and the cries of wounded men filled the air, and Antony felt the tide of battle beginning to turn against him. "Push forward," he bellowed, desperation creeping into his voice. "Do not let them break our lines." But the relentless onslaught continued, and soon, Antony realized they were outnumbered. The sight of Octavian's flagship, the Augustus, loomed ominously ahead, a symbol of the threat they faced. Cleopatra watched from her barge, anxiety clawing at her insides as she observed the chaos unfolding before her. Each crashing wave echoed the dread in her heart. "What are they doing?" she demanded of her advisors. "Why aren't they advancing?" "Octavian's forces are too strong, Your Majesty," one advisor replied, fear evident in his voice. We must prepare to retreat. No. Cleopatra insisted, her voice rising above the turmoil. We cannot abandon Antony. He needs us now more than ever. But as the battle raged on, she felt a sinking realization. The tide of war was not in their favor. A ship near the front lines erupted in flames, and she could hear the anguished cries of men as they were engulfed by the chaos. She turned away from the spectacle, her heart heavy with despair. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a crimson hue across the battlefield, the situation grew increasingly dire. Antony's ships began to falter, many sinking or retreating in disarray. The sight of his fleet being overwhelmed sent a chill through his bones. Fall back. Regroup, he shouted, but it was too late. The enemy was closing in from all sides, and the weight of defeat bore down on him like an anchor dragging him under. The moment was agonizingly clear. Octavian's forces had gained the upper hand. Cleopatra watched in horror as the last remnants of Antony's fleet were decimated, and her heart sank into despair. With a heavy heart, she knew what must be done. Prepared to retreat, she commanded her crew, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. We will not be captured. We must escape. As Cleopatra's barge began to pull away from the battlefield, she cast one last glance at Antony, whose face was twisted in defiance and anguish. Forgive me, she whispered, her heart breaking as the distance between them grew. Antony, realizing the tide had turned irrevocably, made one last stand. But with the overwhelming might of Octavian's forces closing in, he knew he could not hold on. The cries of his men echoed in his ears, a haunting reminder of the defeat that loomed. Retreat, he shouted, though deep down, he understood the futility of it. The battle was lost, and with it, the future he had envisioned alongside Cleopatra. As he turned to leave the field, the smoke swirling around him, he could feel the weight of despair crushing his spirit. The romance of their union had become a bittersweet memory, overshadowed by the harsh reality of defeat. The Battle of Actium marked a turning point, the sands of fate shifting against Antony and Cleopatra. As Cleopatra's barge slipped away from the chaos, she felt the sting of loss. The love that had ignited their ambitions now stood threatened by the looming specter of Octavian's wrath. With their retreat, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a shadow over the waters of Actium, foreshadowing the storm that awaited them. The air was heavy with silence as Cleopatra retreated to her tomb, a sanctuary that had once been a symbol of power and permanence. The cool, stone walls whispered of the past, echoing the grandeur of her reign, now overshadowed by the weight of impending doom. The flickering torchlight danced against the ancient carvings, illuminating the intricate hieroglyphs that celebrated her lineage and accomplishments. As she stepped inside, the world outside faded, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She felt the familiar embrace of despair wrap around her, mingling with a flicker of defiance that had sustained her through the trials of her life. In the dim light, she could see the grand sarcophagus, adorned with precious jewels and intricate designs, a stark reminder of her royal status now on the brink of collapse. Cleopatra sank to the floor, her heart heavy with the weight of her decisions. The battle at Actium had shattered not only her forces but also her dreams of power alongside Antony. With every breath, She could feel the reality of Octavian's impending arrival tightening around her, a noose of fate that she could neither escape nor soften. "Why did it come to this?" she murmured, her voice barely a whisper against the tomb's stillness. The memories of her life flashed before her, her youth, her cunning schemes, her passionate love with Antony, and the vibrant reign she had once envisioned for herself and her son, Caesar Ion. Each moment felt like a grain of sand slipping through her fingers, leaving behind an empty void. She had fought valiantly, aligning herself with powerful men, leveraging her beauty and intelligence to navigate the treacherous waters of politics. Yet, in the end, it had all been for naught. Octavian, with his relentless ambition and calculated maneuvers, had dismantled her empire with a single blow, leaving her with nothing but echoes of her former glory. As the realization settled in, Cleopatra clenched her fists, a surge of anger coursing through her veins. "I will not be a pawn in his game," she vowed, determination flashing in her eyes. "I am a queen, and I will not be stripped of my dignity without a fight." But deep down, uncertainty gnawed at her resolve. Octavian's forces were closing in, and he was a man of immense power and ambition. What would he do when he captured her? Would he seek to humiliate her publicly, stripping her of her crown and her very essence? The thought sent a chill down her spine. With a deep breath, Cleopatra rose to her feet, brushing her hands over the cool stone of the sarcophagus. "If I am to be taken, it will not be without my own choice," she declared fiercely. The tomb had once been a place of reverence for her ancestors, now it would serve as a fortress of her final stand. She approached a small table adorned with ancient relics, her fingers grazing the sharp edge of a hidden dagger, an instrument of both beauty and death. It gleamed menacingly in the flickering light, a reminder of the power she held over her fate. "I will not be forgotten. I will go out on my own terms," she whispered, contemplating the finality of her choice. As the echoes of Octavian's approach grew nearer, Cleopatra steeled herself. She would not allow her legacy to be tarnished. The world would remember her not as a victim but as a queen who chose her own fate. "Let him come," she thought defiantly. "Let the world see that Cleopatra, the last Pharaoh of Egypt, will not bow to the likes of Octavian. I will shape my end as I have shaped my life, boldly, fiercely, and with passion." In the depths of her tomb, Cleopatra stood tall, resolute in the face of fate. The shadows danced around her, and the weight of history pressed upon her shoulders, but she felt a spark of fire igniting within her. No matter what awaited her, she would remain a queen until her last breath.